Hey, everybody, and welcome to Hash Church, episode 131. I'm here on the Sunshine Coast today for Hash Church, beautiful British Columbia. We're going to be sending out the links here in a second. I just want to make sure I can mute. Start streaming live here. Here we go. There's the mute button. Excellent. All right. Send out the links to the crew, i.e. the panelists. We got no shortage of them. Boom to them. Bet you will see some people in real quick now. And boom to them. And all right. Hope everyone's doing good. Beautiful, beautiful day here in British Columbia. Happy to be back from the Dominican Republic. I was gone for 8 days there. Of course, I didn't puff for 8 whole days, which was very talk about that a little bit today. Once some of the panelists get into the room, I'm going to see if that link is working because I see Etienne has popped into the room. Hey, how's that for a shirt?
Hey, nice shirt, buddy.
Dude, that's awesome. Is it?
Yep, same shirt.
That's awesome.
Happy Hash Church. Good to have you back, buddy.
Yeah, thank you, dude. All right, look at this. We got Skunk Man, we got Indra, we got Johnny B in the house.
Welcome, Indra. Welcome, Johnny B.
How we doing?
Welcome, Skunk Man. Good to have y'all.
Hey, Etienne. I didn't realize a couple.
Oh, you got to turn off the YouTube video so we can get some better sound coming in there. I can hear myself.
Okay, I got it now. Can you hear yourself? Or am I hearing myself?
Yes. What's up, Johnny B? I can't see you. Oh, there you are.
Right here.
No, I can. No, I can.
Where says that stuff? This guy.
There he is.
Fantastic.
All right.
Week in the Dominican for you. And you know what? Even my dad was commenting on how great it was to hear how you didn't smoke and how you were able to. Most people think that cannabis is addictive. And when people like ourselves who are heavy players go a week without smoking, we're like, yeah. Great to hear, man. Great to see.
Yeah, it wasn't a problem.
Of course not.
It was not a problem.
Non-addictive drugs. That's what everybody's got to really understand, that cannabis is non-addictive and it's one of the best medicines on the planet. Anyways, I'm going to do bong rip to that one, my friend.
I agree.
Nice, 8 days off. I puffed for the first time over at my buddy's house, actually out of this completely ridiculous piece here. For those of you that have seen the new Sphere Joe Peters collab with SPATX. This is hitting it quite a bit today on church. We've got some Joe P bees inside the perk and drippy goodness. So pretty stoked on this little guy.
That looks sick.
Joe P does some great stuff. I just got a Joe P by Mueller collab myself.
There's my little Joe P.
Nice. Yeah, Joe P. He's killing it these days. Absolutely. So yeah, this is.
You can definitely see the same drip.
Looks like a spaceship from Mars.
Oh yeah.
It is a spaceship from Mars, actually. Little bumblebees inside the beehive perk.
Crazy.
Yeah. It's what's really cool is hitting that for the first time in 8 days. I got to hit some of Concentrated X's strawberry banana full melt, and man, what a nice vibe. Definitely wasn't uncomfortable, didn't get overly baked. I guess my tolerance didn't go down maybe as low as it would have had I taken off a month or 6 weeks. But it is funny, people that don't smoke cannabis, how happy they are when you take a break. They just seem to be ecstatic about it, and I'm not quite sure where the connection is, but I'm happy to be back, actually. I'm going to have a little rip of this Seedsman Haze Sweet Skunk rosin collaboration here out of this Joe P. So I guess bong rip mother lubbers, as D420K would say.
Well, you know what Woody Harrelson said about it? It made him emotionally unavailable, kind of like Dr. Mark.
That's Hi, Doc. You were a bit aggressive last week, man. People were asking, does that distillate man make you aggro? What the hell, bro?
I think I was just in a different time zone.
That can happen sometimes. That can happen sometimes, Mark. I didn't catch it, but I heard.
And the food poisoning and all that. Trust me, it's no fun. I've traveled when I originally traveled to Cannabis back in 2010. I got food poisoning there, and I know when you're traveling, it is absolutely discombobulating having that sort of situation when you're not at home and not accessing whatever you usually utilize. So I feel you there, Mark.
Well,
Hope
plus
you're feeling better this
blame
week.
fat white guys for something. I forget what, right? Prohibition or something like that. We were talking about the word. So yeah, she blamed fat white guys, and she forgot that she was talking to a fat white guy.
Did she generalize you?
Yeah, well, I'm fat and I'm white. I don't know what to say, man. It's like, I don't know. It caught me at a rare moment, and yeah, I mean, maybe it was the concentrates, perhaps. Yeah, I needed because remember when I dabbed Intranasal oil, it seemed like I was about to fall asleep. So somewhere between Northern California and Southern California, I need to hit the right balance.
Yes, that's why I jokingly called it.
It was definitely
Go ahead,
you
Sam.
she was talking about, though, because I don't know a single other fat white guy.
Oh shit, that's funny.
I can resemble that remark at times, but I'm losing weight at the moment. But I still look like a fat white guy if you just looked at me, and I'm okay with it.
So we're gonna have Forrest Lee come in today again and share some more information with us. I guess, from House of Laughter. They were both in a couple of weeks ago talking about Harlequin and talking about Silas's story. Pretty good guests. I enjoyed having them on, so I invited them back again today, and we should be able to get into a nice little conversation with those guys in the upcoming hour or so, and make sure that Todd McCormick got that link, because I still do not see him in the room, and that's rare, don't you guys think?
Todd's normally like the first one in.
Yeah, Todd's been.
Actually, no, Etienne's the first one.
Todd and
Etienne is
By
all
me or
we-
Todd or Mark or
Ted and I went to see
Sometimes,
Pat and Oswald last night, so maybe he had a later night than myself. But we saw him in San Francisco, and fucking hysterical. I was in tears multiple times. The guy, he lost his wife just about a year ago, and he talked about that. But his humor is just on point. So it was great. I had a great time. It was a double date. We both took our girls out. We went out to this nice vegetarian restaurant in San Francisco, and then we went to this show and had a blast. So we didn't get into like midnight or so.
Nice. Yeah, I myself enjoyed some comedy last night. We watched the two Chappelle stand-ups, which, wow, really great stuff. Definitely won't. I love the fact that he takes people and forces it and, removes this sort of fear of missing out. And it's like, no, you're here. You're the lucky ones, but you're not allowed to film it. Take cell phones at the down. They're taken out of the building if they do. And I guess with music, it's one thing, but with comedy, where punchlines are pretty important, seeing that by watching it prior to going and seeing it, little clips of it on YouTube or whatnot, really does change it. So luckily, because the way he did it, I had not seen or heard a single joke from his show, and I really, really, really enjoyed both of them. They were, he had me in stitches, holding my stomach, laughing most of those shows. Guy's talented. Long, awkward pause.
So what did you do with the family there in the Dominican Republic?
Well, the Dominican Republic was pretty chill. We did a lot of beach and a lot of pool stuff that I don't usually do, but I did a little adventure where we rented these like a golf cart for the wife and the young son, and then rented Segways with big 4-wheel drive tires for the two older kids. and they just we cruised down this sort of on the Caribbean side of the island, which we were staying on the other side, and then there's a nice real trail that you can take the golf cart on. It's kind of almost golf course-esque, but it's not a golf course. It was a huge property that I guess someone lost their shirt and went bankrupt, and so it was all abandoned, but you could still cruise through and see the beautiful views, go through the jungle and see these giant, huge iguanas. It was fun. It was good fun with the family, and always good to always good. Most of the reason that, most of the family men that I associate with and I know, the focus is definitely to spend as much time with the family. Yet there's this dichotomy that gets produced in trying to produce more, trying to create and produce more, that ends up away from your family more. So it's strange. It's definitely strange. So what do we got going on in chat room here? Is everyone else in here right now?
Rip.
There we go. There we go. It seems like everyone's frozen to me, and I have a pretty straight right now.
You're coming semi-choppy. You come through smooth, and then you get a slight skip every once in a while, but for the most part, you've been solid.
Yeah, that's weird. I what the fuck? I wonder if it's the speed of the memory in this computer that I need to bump up.
Maybe try buying a newer computer than the 1984 one.
It was a 2016.
Oh. Well,
my computer's 8 years old and I don't have any problem. It's just a laptop.
You're just trying to make him feel bad.
No.
Well, you know what? I'll out and pull back a little bit if I'm laggy like that, because I hate to lag out the show.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't think you need to pull back, dude. It's not that bad.
No, you're not lagging hardly at all this time. There's been times when you do a lot, but not this time. It's almost right.
Yeah, it's just a slight. It's nowhere near what it's been, trust me.
Just sounds like a special effect.
We're all kind of just like lip syncing, right?
Yeah, just do it like
the memory. It's got to be the memory. I'm on a killer internet right now. It's like down to 40 megs per second. Upload was like 100. So it's not the Wi-Fi.
Well, it's not so much an echo. It's like watching a kung fu movie. Your lips move and then the voice comes out. So it's kind of humorous, but it's not so echoey. But sometimes when you're just sitting there quiet, you're talking, which is kind of...
Not only that, Marcus, but you have a Chinese accent also.
Oh, see, I was hearing it in Chinese too. I thought it was me. I thought I was crazy. Oh, wait, I am. Never mind.
Probably your headphones, dude.
Shouldn't get these headphones that are made in China. I should have known. Oh. So, Dr. Scaldone, what's going on in Pennsylvania there? I've heard some rumors that things are moving along. What's the pace so far?
Pennsylvania?
Yeah, on last Monday, the applications were due, and this was for processing and cultivating and dispensaries, and they divvied up the state into 6 different sort of geographic zones. And they had a lot of people come in from out of state. I thought the number that they were estimating, I don't know where they got this number from, was 800 different groups were going to apply in these 6 different regions. And it's a good bill. It's all no flower, so it's all oil. So that's interesting. But they also approved 550, I think that's the current count, of patients to have what's called a safe harbor letter. Pennsylvania we're talking about here, Mark. So safe harbor is a letter that that patients can present to authorities kind of like what Johnny was showing, to say that they're legally authorized to have cannabis with them, especially if they're going through airports, or if they're pulled over or something like that, or if some type of search shows that they have cannabis on them. There's a letter that's provided with the governor's signature through the Department of Health that basically says that they're okay to have that material with them. So that's kind of cool.
You have to have a note from your mom too.
Yeah, you have to have a note from your.
Does Penn
Did
Dot
they
also
announce
give
that
us
it's
give a
only
sign off as
oil?
well?
Did you say?
Say again,
I'm sorry. Well, the process or the processing piece here is all going to be processed, into oil. There's going to be no flower sales. However, I do believe that the safe harbor letter allows them to have cannabis in any form, whether it's oil or flower.
Well, they've got to have flowers to get the oil in the first place. I mean, who gets to have the flowers? Just the growers, or is it another one of those miracle situations?
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Also, will there be an LTP tax on it?
Oh, I don't. You mean like liquor?
Well, I know any sodas and stuff like that were made in Pennsylvania that all had an LTP, or anything that went through there had an LTP stamp on it for the LTP tax that's paid to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, they had a fucked up sugar tax on big beverages. Yeah, the beverage industry was heavily against that. Yeah, I don't know what the concept is there. I think some of that money is supposed to be brought back to community to help fight the obesity problem somehow. I don't know. It's like a user tax. I don't know. It would be like, taxing people who eat, fat and hot dogs and stuff like that. I don't know.
Hey, welcome, Forrest.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. How are you?
Doing good for
Very
us.
well, very well.
It's
Mark
great
was
to see
just
it,
telling us a little bit about what's going on out in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Yeah.
So no permits in Pennsylvania at this time. They're still working on that at the state level, correct?
Yeah, applications were turned in this past Monday, and from what I understood, it was going to be somewhere between 6 to 8 months before they start letting people know who got their licenses. Yeah.
I wonder how many applied.
Probably another 6 to 8 months before the program actually comes into effect. So it's still, about a year away probably from actually being implemented, unfortunately.
I'm going to try downstairs into another computer, so I'll let you guys just talk for a little bit. It shouldn't take me much more than 5 minutes to see if I can't get into a faster connection, so I'm less laggy.
Okay, I'll go in and give Forrest an interview here minorly. So Forrest, what's your background, and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into cannabis.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me back here. Well, my background is that, besides the typical interrelationship with cannabis that comes with being a musician for the first half of my life, I really got into cannabis science when my son, at about 3 years old, was diagnosed with Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, which is a rare form of epilepsy that is progressive and degenerative and relentless and ruthless and all those horrible things that you see when you get into rare epilepsy, where we had a healthy kid, and then within a year he was having thousands of seizures a month. So from perfectly healthy to life in jeopardy. So like a lot of people, that kind of motivates you to start studying and researching and figuring things out when your doctor tells you that there's no other option. So that's really what got me into a really intense studying of cannabis. Went out and started speaking with, all the doctors that could give me the best information, Ethan Russo, speaking with some of the universities in Israel to get the science as it was coming out to the best that I could, and just really tried to become an expert, quote unquote, as much as I could on the endocannabinoid system, and as much as we knew about the relationship of the phytocannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids in cannabis, and how they interact with the brain, in this search to try to save my kid, essentially, in which we've been able to cut his seizures down by 90% when they thought he wasn't going to live through 2015. So that's how I got into cannabis. And here in Northern California, we had a ban, and I know that's happened in a lot of states. So as legalization was becoming more and more imminent, the League of California Cities, some of those groups, SAM and others, came in and started to really petition hard for cultivation bans in counties across California. And you see most of California, although we have this quote unquote legalization, are still in such heavy cultivation and commercial ordinance bans that, you know, really not much can be done. So when that started coming through my county, I got politically active. Echo. So we got really politically active, and then started running campaigns to educate and essentially call out the ideologists who have all these outdated bad science information that they use to validate banning cannabis, and really started talking to politicians and parents from another parent, and kind of really being in your face about it, about the risks of holding on to these, you know, outdated thoughts and beliefs about cannabis. You know, the reefer madness rhetoric just wasn't funny anymore once I saw that my kid's life depended on it. So that just spiraled into more and more advocacy for not just ourselves, but of course other parents come out of the woodwork. And what we really saw was that, you know, in my opinion, cannabis has the moral and ethical high ground as far as the argument for what is needed in our communities. And what I noticed was there's just a lack of people who could articulate it in a way that I thought really got the message across. So as I did that more and more, I started giving talks and lectures, just trying to educate my community on the endocannabinoid system. It was just, you know, we had more and more families come out looking for support. And I started hearing more and more stories of a couple things. Either, you know, we had families with kids that we know who were given products that weren't really therapeutically beneficial, and then they eventually gave up on cannabis, and some of those kids eventually died. And so I saw a real problem with the education level as far as real cannabis medicine and therapeutic approaches within the cannabis community and the dispensaries and bud tenders at the time, as well as this problem of these ideological people who are willing to strip the rights of families to have access to cannabis medicine for the sake of saving their communities. So I found myself kind of in the middle of both industries, trying to just do my best to get us all up as quick as possible so that we're not unintentionally putting fragile lives at risk. And that's what's led me to where I am today, which is a lot of advocacy. We started a nonprofit that does free education services to families who are just coming into the cannabis world completely 100% cannabis naive, because we found they're just ripe to being taken advantage of by you know, some entrepreneurs. And there's a lot of good ones out there. We all know that, but we also know there's a lot of other ones who might not be as good, might not be as educated on what they're doing, and are just looking to make a niche in the business. And unfortunately, they do that by convincing folks that what they have is magic and it's all they need, without really understanding some of the sensitive needs of some rare diseases and things out there. So that's what's kind of got me out here today. And with the Caladrius Network, our network, we do those educational services for families, as well as when we can, we donate medicine and therapies and oils and things like that to families at no charge, to help them with their heavy costs, because some of these kids have high demands. So
Forrest,
that's what brought me here. Yeah.
How's your son doing today?
You know, he's okay today. It's it's an up and down thing with rare epilepsy, man. It's like trying to chase a moving target. It's not like other therapies or pain management where you can really dial it in, because for every pound they gain when they hit puberty, all these other things, you're just chasing this moving target. So, he was at his peak having 2,500 seizures a month, and we've dropped that by 90%. But 10% of 2,500 is still 250 seizures. So too many, and that's where I'm just struggling and fighting really hard to get that last 10% down for him. But all things considered, I mean, this was a child who we didn't think was going to live through the year in 2015, to be blunt, and now he's managed. I mean, it's in a state where, although it's not as where I would like it to be, which is zero, he's functioning and having as much of a normal life as he can. So we try to stay grateful for those things.
Well, we're glad to have you back. I think I'm back now, finally. I think I'm not
better.
Choppy. I sound okay.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Gonna have to upgrade the RAM on my laptop. It's just not pushing enough RAM. Yes, so I think we also sent out the link to Wade. I sent out the link to quite a few people today, but I'm taking up 2 spots in the room. I'm worried that if I close my original spot, it will stop the broadcast, although I am signed in as an admin on this one, and it does have the red button that says stop broadcast. What do you guys think? Should I close that other one up?
Do it up.
I think
Makes it right.
Let's gamble. Throw it out there. If not, we'll see you guys all in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I wouldn't have to restart the whole thing. So, all right, yeah, I'll try to shut that one up here.
Come on, do it, Marcus.
Let's do it. Everybody do a bong rip at the same time.
All right, give me a second. I'll do it right now.
All right, bong drip.
Bong rip.
Yeah, Mark, you're just sitting there. You're not doing a bong rip, Dr. Scaldone. Come on. What's up, man?
I'm contemplating a bong rip.
Just
How about this dosa?
What's with all these pipes you're pulling up from all around? You're like surrounded by glass right now. How about this? I got this one right here.
Dude, fat dosa too, man.
Dude.
Nice. Show us the bottom on that baby. It's got to have a fat little
All right,
bottom.
let me just take this little directional. Clear, clean. Oh, here we go.
Beautiful little orange booty there.
I got some. I love my down pipe. Sick recycler.
And Indra, that picture you keep showing, is that a one-hitter or a two-hitter?
That's a one-hitter for real men.
Real big, man. With real big lungs.
Dude, you just get in it. See?
That's a one-hitter for Andre the Giant,
Also,
isn't it?
It's kind of like the frozen tombs from thousands of years where they used to put their head underneath a tent and inhale cannabis fumes from flowers smoking in an incense.
Would that have been the Scythians?
Yes, it was the Scythians.
Not only is that, they also they found a young mother giving birth in a small Scythian tube that was also had lots of burning cannabis, and they found her inside of it.
It's been found a few times. That's absolutely correct. I think the first one was the Peseric frozen tomb site that was unearthed in the 40s.
Mm.
Well, that one's a lot like a hyperbaric chamber. You just get in and we pressure you up until you're good and high.
Nice. Hey, welcome back, Wade.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Nice
Had
to
a little
see you.
technical
Nice to hear your voice.
Right back at you. I feel really blessed and honored to be here this morning.
I feel blessed and honored that I was able to literally go from like the 8 megabit RAM on my little laptop and had me coming through like I was a robot, and then walk downstairs to the Mac Pro with the 32 gigs of RAM. And now I can just be heard and I'm not choppy. And I am really grateful for that right now.
But if you ever want to make a kung fu
Absolutely.
movie, that other computer is definitely the one to use. Because
That's the
I have
one.
never seen a better kung fu separation of words and lip movement in my life.
I'll have to go back and watch that. Thank God it was recorded. And so, you know, Forrest, since last time you were here, you have inspired much of the Hash Church panel to go and purchase microphones.
This microphone.
I like it. The blue one. Yeah, I've been eyeballing that baby myself.
Yeah,
Good.
so there's got a couple Yetis. I think Todd ended up getting a Yeti, as did D420K and Etienne.
All right. I'll have to let Blue
What
know
about
to get my
mine?
sponsorship
Sound
going.
quality.
Yeah, exactly. You should have been like, listen, we all told them. Forrest sent us. I was surprised that they were available at my local Best Buy, which really kind of surprised me. I was
Yeah,
like,
I'm picking up one of those Yetis soon for our Around the Table podcast we're going to start doing.
oh, yeah.
Up here in Northern California, get some folks around the table, just set that thing in the middle and just start getting those things recorded. But yeah, those are great. I thought you guys sounded a little better today.
I didn't get earphones, but I did get a microphone.
Nice.
Very nice.
Sam
With
with
a
the mic.
built-in delay, or
No, it's just so I could sit at my chair and turn the mic on and off, really.
Brilliant move,
Right.
Sam.
That is a brilliant move. I think Todd was mentioning that just a couple of weeks ago to me. Literally. We need to get Sam a mic that has a long cable that goes all the way to his dab station. The dab station. Well, it's great Sunday afternoon. Sunday morning, really, I guess, unless you're on the East Coast or in Europe or in most of the rest of the world.
So,
Yeah.
Will, would you tell everybody a little bit about yourself for those who are watching and may not know who you are?
That's Wade.
Wait, pardon me.
Yes.
My bad.
Give an
I guess
update.
that proves that not a lot of people will know who he is, Bart, huh?
Let's see. I, among other things, am the person who identified and propagated to such an extent the cultivar known as Harlequin. That was back in 2007, 2008, when I first found the plant, and I've never tried to take credit for breeding it. I was gifted the seeds, but I am the person responsible for recognizing the potential in that plant and making sure as many people as possible had a copy of it. And since then, I've had the opportunity to work with a number of patients, a number of clinicians, and a number of dispensaries in not just getting plant material like Harlequin out there into the world, but have been working pretty strong and steady on trying to find new versions of cannabis that have therapeutic properties in addition to the ones that Harlequin has revealed.
Wade
That's a
embodies
fair
the
statement.
Wade embodies the attitude of free the weed and what's best for the society as opposed to what's best for himself. And I see that constantly, and I think Harlequin's a great example of that. Do I develop a proprietary strain that I just monopolize and exploit the shit out of, or do we give it to as many people so as many people can be helped as we can? And I've always respected that.
Forrest?
Thank you, Forrest.
I just want to tell you guys a brief story. I took every possible CBD cultivar and extracted it all in the same moment. And the reason I did was because I have an 88-year-old friend in Kansas who's got every kind of cancer. She was on her deathbed, and she was really down to just texting me a few words a day and then sleeping for hours. And so I took all of those oil from the cultivars, mixed it up with some of the terpenes that I've been selectively separating, sent them to her in capsules. And 3 days later, I got this phone call, and it was her. And I said, "Hey, how you doing? You sound really good." And she said, "Well, let me tell you something." She said, "Whatever was in those is the thing, because I hadn't been eating at all. And now I'm getting up and I'm eating and I'm doing housework and I feel like $1 million.
Wonderful.
And that's not all green and wrinkled either, but
hey, good work. Good work. It's
That's-
amazing what can happen when your endocannabinoid system starts to function ideally, huh?
I have to say, I'm also from the sharing is caring school of thought, and it did get me into a little bit of trouble here in BC, just passing out cultivars and being like, and it actually led me, what my train of thought, how I got led there was from like sick kids. I would be like, okay, just a second. Like, so you're not supposed to share this cultivar. You're not supposed to give it out. But what if you did? And then somehow it got to like a child that really needed it and it increased the quality of their life like hugely. And I'm thinking, you like have a moral responsibility to do that. Like you got to put that. I loved when you said, and I tried to get as many copies out there to as many people, because that's like, that's my school of thought too. When I had my garden growing last year and I had all these wonderful cultivars that I had acquired from the Astro Boy from Subcool, which we had as a watermelon pheno, and the Congo, which was very, very loved by many, the Congolese, and the Northern Lights from Doc Atomic from like the mid 80s. And, along this line, all these really special things, I would just try to give them away. Like people would come over and be like, oh, can I get a cut of that? I'm like, oh, you can get as many as you want, man. Like of each one, like I'll start cutting them right now, or you can wait and I'll get you rooted ones. And people were always like, wow, like, and what's, I guess you don't want me to give these out. And I'd be like, no, like you should probably I think that it would be good for you to give them out to as many people as possible. Both for them and for yourself when you eventually fuck up and lose the ones you have. If you've given them to a dozen people, you won't believe how easy it is to get them back.
Yeah, that's it. There's nothing wrong with a business, and we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But I just tried to shine a light on the same moral question that a lot of the cannabis community has been blasting the pharmaceutical community about for decades, right? They say that Merck is evil and they put patients before profits. And I think a lot more quickly than people realize, we were faced with the same question. What are you going to do when you hold the answer? And you're faced with the potential for great monetary gain versus people's health and in some cases, life, when we have, now that we know that some of these cannabinoids are the modulator in the system that can be the difference between life and death for certain conditions. What are we going to do when the question is your money or your life? And there's just I think it's a healthy conversation to have, and it's not all one and it's not all the other, but if we don't address it, we can easily become, and we see that with a lot of big companies now, exactly what we were trying, me at least, was hoping that we would be defeating in this country, which is this need to monetize human suffering.
Well said.
Yeah, absolutely well said. No, I agree for sure. There's definitely many different sides to come at it. But from my perspective as a federal patient in Canada under the MMAR injunction, I always felt like it was just good to like Johnny B and I, we were like, I'd be like, here's all my cultivars. And he'd be like, well, here's all mine. And then all of a sudden we were growing each other's.
And I'm sure both your businesses went down the drain at that point, right?
Oh, it was horrible. Horrible. The cuts ended up at a cut house. And
there is two sides to the coin.
Of course.
And that is, if professional breeders using breeding programs that take several years and dozens of acres of land and infrastructure, staff, and everything else. I would like to see that in the future, and
sure.
They're going to want an economic return on it, and I think they deserve it.
Absolutely. They've definitely put the time and the work in, and depending on it would be like a vast difference in the way that that's like a tuned machine. And people are obviously going to pay for that.
In the very short-term future, you can breed a cannabis plant that produces a lot of cannabis, the target, and has response to the photo periods the way you want it to, for the area that you want it to, and has the cannabinoid and terpene profile that you desire. They'll be able to breed it like this very quickly.
It's already coming. Yeah. I want to share that in terms of the economic impact of giving things away, the way I worked with Harlequin has given back to me many times over, not just financially, but in terms of the people I've come to know and the life experiences that it has provided in my life.
I understand how you feel. I guess what I'm saying is that, for example, what if you wanted to have your own gas chromatography and HPLC laboratory a decade ago to be able to do better work?
Yes.
Who would have paid for it?
Sure.
Exactly.
I think obviously that's a great point. And that's what I mean when we say that there's a balance there. I think where I come from a lot of times when I start talking about this is the practice that we see, and maybe not everyone else sees it, because I deal with a field that deals with really critically ill people and children in particular. And there is a trend of breeding common strains, and just so they can give them a new name, and then having a marketing campaign that tells parents that this is the only one that say has high CBD in it, and this is the product that is the only one, and they intentionally omit information. They don't teach parents about cannabinoids and milligrams per body weight and those things. They just market it in a different way that I think is not as ethical as, say, someone who's doing what you're doing, which is, trying to start a business. And it's different when you then convince parents that their only savior is continuing to buy your product and intentionally don't educate them. And I see that a lot with a lot of the very well-known high CBD product companies in Colorado and other places, where you buy those things and it doesn't say anything on it. It doesn't talk about cannabinoids, doesn't tell you the milligrams that are in it. And when they say, is this something I can do at home? They say, no, this is our special strain that only we can get and only we can save your kids. When I know for a fact they're just breeding ACDC and RO4 or some other strains and then giving it a new name so that they can have this tactic to keep these parents dependent on them. I think to me, that's different. And which is why just education is good. What you're talking about is real science and real work and real education. And I think as long as people know what they're getting and what they're doing so that they're not being exploited, then we're all being good. We're all being good, ethical, moral folks. But that's not happening with a lot of businesses, and maybe I just see it more than others or are more sensitive to it.
I want to encourage breeders in the future that use modern molecular methods to be able to breed much better cannabis. I'm not talking GMO. I'm just talking molecular methods such as marker genes and stuff.
Right.
Like is used for corn, soy, and just about every other big agricultural crop.
Hear, hear.
They were doing the same thing here. I was looking at strains that were high in CBD, and they just named them different names, and I tested them, and they were the exact same strain. They were the highest common that we call up here, very high CBD, 3 different, and they entered it into a cup. They go, well, this is a so-and-so, it was a dispensary, I won't say the name, strain. I'm like, no, it's not. It's the same Haley's that I've been growing for 6 years, identical. And that's the problem. That's why we need this testing. We need that profile so we can see the profile so kids can actually, and patients know exactly what they're taking. It is very critical for Haley and her mom, Cheryl. Like, I know exactly the ratios we had to work with CBD to THC. And if you change that, like before your son starts seizing, and then trying to get that same efficacy again, or that same cannabinoid profile, really it's like you're chasing it. And I know I was just with Dr. Paul Hornby the other day, yesterday, and he's very about CBD, and he's now gotten CBD coming from Sylvania, so now we're getting the same standardized dosage. Actually, it's really take a look at how that's going to start working and stuff, because we're now taking a look outside of the country. I mean, it's just a better way of being able to maybe find that true, because when it's being bred on, and when it's being grown at such a mass scale for other usage, and we're able to get those proper profile of it, then we can start getting that consistency for people and for patients, and then we don't have to change that. And you can look at actually having a medicine that might last until, like say, when going through the puberty stage, cadmium periods with Haley and stuff like that was the same thing. Just trying to find those times when you're able to actually work against that condition.
Yeah, I think that's the difference. There's a big difference between, you know, something really special or different and working towards it, and kind of the backyard breeder thing we have going on, where everyone's just looking to coin a trademark. And when you get them all in the labs, 90% of them, you know, are hybrids that are relatively similar. You know, we're talking about different terpenes, we're talking about different levels of the cannabinoids. But, you know, then as you guys know, there's these special strains where people have worked really hard and they're different. So it's just kind of shining a light on that is happening in the community. And hopefully, you know, I really hope the people who are businessmen are thinking about this as they move forward and when they're marketing, especially if their sole product is to be marketed to the most critically ill, you know, products like rescue nasal sprays, or products that are specifically designed for seizures and other terminal conditions, that they're just making sure, in my opinion, that they're doing it in a way that is moral and ethical. But hey, we wish that in every aspect of business life, right? And, you know, been holding our breath forever, and humans do what they do. So,
well, it's a fine line that gets pushed in the direction that we don't want it to go in more often than not. So it makes sense to have a little bit of worry about it. I mean, both of you guys had great points. You know, when you're hiring staff with PhDs and you need expensive machinery to measure and do extreme chemistry on, and to know what you're doing, and to grow and breed and put all those years in and knowledge, that's obviously there's value there. And it's not like we as humans don't want to pay for things that help heal us. That's a very good use of our money.
That's
we
it.
don't want to get jacked, and we just don't want to feel trapped and, you know, cornered. And it's like, look, we're going to give you this medication, but you're going to need it for the rest of your life. It's really expensive. And they just fall into this system that seems to push that line to the very, very end, to the point where you have to be pretty close to the wall to notice it's even there.
Well, and at the end of the day, it's cannabis. It's not. We're not breeding magic beans. You know.
I always say that, actually, that the magic is the cannabinoids and the, you know, the profile of these terpenes.
It is magic because, for example, there were no high CBD varieties, only CBD varieties, but, you know, over 10, 20% more than a decade ago. They just did not exist.
Well, yeah, prohibition had a big influence on that, though. I mean, not the plant, right? That was the market, you know, the marketplace.
No, I feel, I mean, most ganja that was imported into America, whether it was from Mexico, South America, Africa, or India, or wherever the hell, except for in the northern hashish producing countries, it was basically just THC. There was little other cannabinoids because the farmers selected away from them for hundreds of years.
Right. I think where did the seeds came from for the Harlequin came from, the CBD strains? That was from around the country, right?
The 4 different landrace cultivars, if you will, that were involved in creating the plant known as Harlequin. The original mother plant is a Swiss landrace. That's just to review the story. The farmer who found it and was the eventual breeder of it was challenged by the fact that this plant never finished flowering in Switzerland. It would grow really huge, produce large amounts of flowers, but it would continue to flower right on until snow and freezing killed it. And so the 3 other landrace types that are involved in Harlequin, besides the Swiss plant, is a Nepali indica, a Thai sativa, and a Colombian sativa. And the two sativas, the Colombian and the Thai, neither of them test as having any CBD in them. They're high THC drug varieties, if you will. On the other hand, the Swiss plant and the Nepalese from the Mustang area of Nepal had high THC, virtually no CBD, or high CBD, virtually no THC. It's been a long time since I looked at those notes, but my memory says that the Swiss plant had about 10% CBD and virtually no THC, and the Nepalese plant had about 12% CBD and no THC, whereas the two sativas were both in the mid-teens of THC and virtually no CBD. And as someone who's been breeding, looking for interesting cultivars, I've really found best results stable THC variety, something that's trusted and loved, and cross it with a CBD variety. And that's where the extreme phenotypes pop out. That's been my experience. A good example of that is someone crossed a Granddaddy Purple male with a Harlequin female and got a cultivar that's coming out 20 to 25 times the amount CBD to THC and fairly significant quantities of cannabinoids present by weight in the finished flowers.
Have you guys taken a look at THCA as a very, very, very powerful addendum to CBDA? THCA in non-active form is one of the most powerful cannabinoids that you can take in a body. I've been advocating THCA ingestion for the last 10 years, but it's only coming to light now through the research that THCA is a very potent addition to the CBD lineup of cannabinoids that are aiding the body.
It's probably the most powerful anti-inflammatory cannabinoid.
There's a company here in the Netherlands called Mary Farm, owned by Marcel de Witt, and he has a patent on using THCA as a medicine.
Boo. Yes, that's just ridiculous to me. I mean, THCA is just a non-activated, for those who don't know who are listening, right? It's the non-activated, right? Or you've heard hasn't been decarboxylated yet form of THC, you know, and so is CBDA. So basically he's got a patent on any THC that has not been heated yet.
A whole bunch of potential uses, and he showed it was beneficial in a couple of specific uses.
Yeah.
Most of the preparations that we're working with in the context of the Caladrius network, as well as in my patients group, we try and preserve the cannabinoids in the acid form. And I would agree really strongly with what you were saying about the efficacy of them. We get really dramatically different results amongst a lot of the patients that we work with when the medicine has been decarboxylated as versus when it's still in the acid form. And I, at the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, their last meeting in the Bay Area, I don't remember the doctor's name, but there was a presentation done on THC in the acid form. And I believe that it's not up yet, but the Society of Cannabis Clinicians, their website has videos of their meetings. And each meeting has at least one presentation from a researcher or a clinician on cannabis medicine. And like I said, the most recent one was on THCA, and it's a very exciting area of research, even for the clinicians as well as the researchers.
Yeah, I don't want to get up and leave to get it, but we rotate medicines for Silas because of his Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. And we found that keeping those rotating actually kind of combats the body's ability to adjust to medicine, which some of those rare intractable epilepsies are famous for. And the second medicine, or rotating medicine, it's an acidic It's Medihaze is the strain, which is anywhere from a 2-to-1 to a 1-to-1, depending on the environment it's grown in. And we were able to get some access to a rosin press so we can keep it in its acidic form and really have just some clean, simple medicines like that, get those into the lab, and we've had really good success in all acidic compound medicines. So we've seen some definite efficacy increases when we're able to modulate between acidic and non-acidic compounds with the dosing schedule. So we are looking to transition. We had a hard time with that. I was just a parent who was getting started. We didn't have access, didn't have money. It's been a long journey getting to where we're at today. So we were using really high quality, but just, distillation methods for our medicines, which would naturally decarboxylate it just because of the process, the heat that was involved in that process. So, we're looking right now to be able to switch over to all solvent-free extractions just for that reason. So that, one, we don't have to worry about solvents, which is always a risk when you have kids who are on high levels of medication already because their liver's already processing quite a bit. So even just a little bit of ethanol or other things can be an issue. But also so that we can keep everything in those acidic forms and then have the option for customized medicine for these kids when we dial things in to be able to give them either the activated or non-activated forms of each of those compounds. Because we're seeing some results from CBDA as well that we haven't quite seen enough to talk about publicly, but I'm really excited in some of the efficacy we're seeing with using that as a rotation, in the rotation as well.
Forrest, that the way I extract is cryogenic, and all my materials raw, and I've passed every nuclear magnetic resonance test on residues. There's no residue in any of our extracts, hasn't been for 12 years. But we produce the raw extract, and it's not, it has to be decarbed if you want to make it active.
Right. Yeah, we had talked about that last time, which was great. You can read all the books you want, but then being able to develop and set up the abilities process are two different things. So it's great to learn from you guys and hear about those processes. But, as people who are, with the fact that we're full-time caregivers, a lot of our volunteers are parents as well. It limits, our processes need to remain relatively simple and for us to be able to do that. But now that we're getting more and more attention, we're helping more families. The lectures I'm giving up and down the state is introducing us to more people. We're looking to partner and be able to partner with labs that are more advanced than what we're able to do, which is what I want to do eventually, which is set up the first solvent-free kind of manufacturing facility that is permitted up here in our neck of the woods. That is the benefit of those things, is although it's labor intensive, it's relatively safe and easy to do. So,
and it's damn fun, I'll say that much.
Yeah.
I just really enjoy getting my hands in there and making some nice water hash or making some sift. It's just it's always enjoyable.
Yeah, same here.
Hey, Forrest, did you tell the story about the company that contacted you about rescue? No,
I haven't told.
It's kind of a downer, but there might be some suggestions amongst the folk here.
If you guys want to get into that, I mean, I was threatened to be sued in the last couple of weeks by some folks, and I don't know if I want to name them or not, but they are one of these companies that sees the need to isolate and limit the what's put out into the world so that they can profit off it. And the fact that basically I put out a video that, I don't know how far down this rabbit hole we want to go. So epilepsy is, if your seizures don't stop, right, you will die. So when they continue to go, that's called status epilepticus, and status epilepticus can be terminal. This is where a lot of deaths happen in epilepsy. That and what's called SUDEP, which is sudden death in epilepsy. And for decades, they've had 3 different types of drugs to intervene, and they're all benzos or Valium, essentially. So you have what are called rescue medications. That's been terminology that's been used for decades. And they go in three ways. They go in sublingually, right, through the mouth, intranasally through the nose, which is a medication called Versed, which is a Valium essentially, and rectally, which is what most families are forced to use. And you get a rectal injection while your kid's seizing. You have to try to get their pants down and do this of the benzodiazepine. So it's these heavy narcotics that, for Silas alone, I just posted on Silas's Facebook page, which is facebook.com/hope for Silas. They had to give him that Ativan, which is the lingual med most people are familiar with, right? We're talking a 9-year-old boy getting 2 to 4 milligrams of Ativan dose at a time. And for 2.5 days later, he's just a screaming nightmare. Like the withdrawals, the effects on the body are insane. And I share all those things on Silas's page because this is part of our process. I think that if people are going to be critical of using cannabis, and they should have to be forced to watch the reality of what our options are with these other drugs and seizures. So we, it's part of trying to find an answer out of that. We've worked with rescue cannabis rectal medications. Might have seen parents do that online. We've worked with rescue cannabis sublingual patient or interventions where they put the full extract, via mouth, see if that works. A lot of parents have luck with that. And obviously, because it's the only other third option, we've worked with intranasal cannabis rescue sprays as well. Well, there is an intranasal cannabis rescue spray that is on the market in Colorado in a company. And when the video of my son went out, because I share it for educational purposes, I worked with my son for 3 months with different medications. And I worked with him with intranasal for quite a long time before I decided to post anything online, because I don't want to be just spreading what I want to be true. I want to make sure what we're talking about, I have some data and some time and some experience with it firsthand with my own son. Once I felt confident that we were seeing benefit from what we were making here at my house, essentially, we posted a video. The video is online. We can show it here. You can go to Silas's Facebook page and see that. Or on YouTube, if you put in rescue spray Silas or cannabis rescue spray and Silas, that video will come up. It just shows it basically working. It shows his nurses using it, not myself. And it shows it stopping the seizure in 20 seconds. And I'd had enough of those experiences to know that it usually stopped the seizure between immediately and 40 seconds. So great. No benzo withdrawal, right? Life saved, non-toxic. Cannabis is amazing. It's a miracle in its ability to influence the brain. Well, that didn't make some companies very happy when they saw that. So I started getting threats that we had stolen and violated their patent, and that they were going to be suing us. This is why I have probably a different perspective from other people, where I'm not trying to talk bad about the cannabis industry, but my experience, or entrepreneurs, but my experience has been with some of the not the most ethical, in my opinion. And we have this happen over and over again. Now, this is a drug that they're trying to say, obviously you can't patent the active ingredient, which is, for some of them, THC. For the one Silas uses, I have an example here. I don't know if you can see that or not. I think it's about 3 milligrams CBD. You got 3 milligrams THC in this one. We found that had less of a negative effect from it afterwards. So it is a different recipe than what that company is using for Silas's. But basically what they told us is they have a patent on the milligrams per spray and the word rescue. So, and that we were in violation, that we had stolen that. And there was some very angry messages put online about how we were thieves and we were stealing from them. And really, I'm just a dad who hasn't sold anything and has made this for his kid. So this is kind of the attitude that I come up against quite a bit.
You got to think in this day and age of social media, though, that company must be like very much so. If they do sue you, they'll try to keep this closed so you can't mention their name, because once you mention that company's name, they are so thrown under the bus. Like,
how can the company be selling a product with THC in it? That's not legal.
Well, they're out of Colorado, and the thing is before he blasted me online, they sent me an email that they're about to come into California. And I think when they
Okay,
saw
but
that we're in
that's
California,
That's not FDA approved. Just
Sure.
because they're selling it in Colorado means
Yeah.
nothing in the big picture.
Yeah, that's
No,
what I
I
would
hear you.
think. They probably have no leg to stand on in reality.
well, I think,
Well, the
let me
real-
correct me if I'm wrong here, but if you can't patent the vessel, because you can get a nasal sprayer online on Amazon in 5 minutes, right? It's 0.1 milligrams per spray, as long as you have the right dosage. It's not the active ingredient. So this would be no different than if I decided I wanted to take out a patent on this vessel, right? These drops that people make for all sorts of different kind of medicine. And I was going to patent that you could, I have a patent on 1 milligram per drop. And I'm going to patent the word drops as well. And then I'm going to sue you or threaten to sue you if we do that. Now, these are just two different vessels. And
Did you look for their patent?
What's their patent on?
I asked them to send it to me and it wasn't sent to me. So, and then I was blocked from all their social media pages.
Well,
And,
I mean,
so I
can't
couldn't
patent the
respond
active
anymore.
ingredient. They can't patent the vessel. It's probably just a bunch of hot air from someone who thinks
Right.
that they have a patent leg to stand on. So I wouldn't pay him any attention.
No.
Well,
I
part
have
of what
it.
part of what's problematic in Forrest's case is he's a family man who doesn't have a big company with lawyers backing him,
Sure.
and nuisance lawsuits are a real hassle. He could end up with a judgment against him by not
No,
contesting it.
He's not selling, then he can't get a judgment against him. Think about it.
It's just, I think it's the, I'm not worried about it. I think shining the light on these things is what I want to do. You know, a lawsuit would be a great way to do that. But not that that's going to happen. It's not going to happen. But it's the ethical problem. I have an ethical problem with that.
Well,
right?
you could always countersue.
Yeah.
That's a waste of time and money and energy, which, of course, you're a father who's trying to just deal
Sure.
with, taking care of your son. But
Just think of the context of it, right? This could only be used by someone who's watching their kid potentially die. This is the only reason for this. And this is kind of what I'm talking about when I talk about the difference in some of these things, where they will take something that you can only make money off of people who kids are dying and potentially dying, and that is so looked at as a gold mine and profitable that we will sue any sort of nonprofit company or anybody who's talking about how to teach people the very non-complicated way of dosing out 5 milligrams per dose or 6 milligrams per dose by doing a little math and having clean extract. These are the sort of things that I think is a line that we shouldn't cross when it comes to pretending we're doing something that no one else can do with cannabis. Some of these things are not hard to do at home. And when it comes to lives on the line, this is not where you pretend you've done something that can't be done by anyone else at home. All that was done was an oil was taken from a dropper to a spray bottle, and it's being sold as if it, online. It took us 2 years of research. It took us tens of thousands of dollars, and if that's the case, they blew a lot of money for no reason. But I don't believe that is the case. I think that's just salesmanship on the point of the company to kind of hold on to this really tight and make sure that no one else is taught how to do it so that they can corner the market. And, right or wrong, as a parent who is of the kids who they're hoping to really exploit with this, I'm not on board with that. I don't think that's the right choice. I don't think it's the right image for cannabis as a whole. This is a plant that it can really be the most powerful force for social good in our society. Things like this just diminish it. I think there's plenty of angles to be profitable and functioning in the cannabis world, but to threaten parents and threaten the sue parents and to lie and distort the truth for such a small percentage of the marketplace on such a critically important issue as status epilepticus seizures is just I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I don't think it's all right.
It reminds me of Bill Hicks's comedy where he's like, if you're in marketing, just kill yourself right now. Seriously. And that whole where he gets,
yes.
He just goes so deep on it. He's like, I bet you they sleep like babies. What did you do today, honey? Oh, we worked on arsenic-based baby foods. Good night.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's it. And the sad part is, I think what really gets me passionate about it is if he's going to do that, fine. He's going to do that. What what bothers me is the parents who are bamboozled along the way, and the parents who are manipulated along the way to believe that, you know, this person is a hero who's doing something that nobody else can do, and they believe it when they say that only he has the power to save my kids, and they convince these parents that they have something that is so special and rare that only they can give it to them, and that hurts, because I've seen parents go through that, but when the product wasn't right for their kids. So, you know, you take these high CBD companies that are really famous. They only push, you need CBD, you need CBD, CBD, and you can only get it from us because it's a special strain. And the parents try it, and then they say, well, that didn't work for me. And they believe that that was all that could have worked, and they give up. And I've been to those kids' funerals. It's a serious issue when it gets to the point of manipulating the parent to believe that they're the sole source for their child's savior.
It's the classic snake oil salesman, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the snake oil salesman, and it's definitely disturbing. You know, it's why I always kind of worried about the way CBD came to be into the spotlight, and the way it was just like the, you know, compared to the black sheep that was THC. It's like, oh my God, like multiple felonies.
Right.
Yeah, that's the THC's bad boy. But the CBD came in as like the valedictorian, blonde-haired, blue-eye, like captain of the football team, quarterback with the most runs. Like, it just was like everyone loved it. And I also came across people that were under the belief through these snake oil salesmen that they only needed CBD because that was for children. And it was like, but your child has a brain tumor. It's like, you might want to do more research on this. And to be led astray for any amount of time, even like a minute, in a situation where a child is suffering so greatly and potentially fatal, that seems to be like pure evil incarnate.
It's just a line. It's a line we have to draw. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's absolutely unethical. It's why we need regulation. It's why we have been calling for testing. I mean, and we're only just into testing, okay? And we still have so much more to go, but it is absolutely, you know, frustrating to hear. And I've seen the same thing, unfortunately, where people get this belief that they're told this one situation or this one RSO or this one situation when this one individual is the only thing to save them is stupefying still to this day. And it does nothing but reek of the stench of snake oil salesmen, because these people know in their heart of hearts they're only padding their dollars as opposed to actually helping people. And that is something that we've always strived for, to try to make today better than yesterday, so that hopefully tomorrow will be better. Okay.
Yeah, I got to say, it's one of the reasons that I've always been stoked and proud of my company, Fresh Headies, and pushing bubble bags out into the world to get people to be able to make this near, just supreme quality, like purity, not quality, sorry. Quality will be based on their genetics and how well they grew it. But to be able to access that kind of purity was never really available to the masses prior to the popularization of water hash in like 98, 99, 2000 and on. And it was, giving people that ability to just in their own home whip up an ounce or whatever and know how much they have of the, this raw cannabinoids, 99.9% gland heads. It was, I've had some touching stories from people just be well received of the product. And, it's obviously more often than not, I can't even sell them the product. I give it to them because you don't want to really, I don't know. I just think that I'd rather make my profits elsewhere.
Before the water sifting, people had to buy imported hashish.
Absolutely.
And imported hashish was commonly 10, 20% THC. It was no stronger than fine simsimia. Pitiful.
Yeah, it's true. It changed the game for sure. And it's unique for Sam to say that because Sam's been puffing 99.9% heads for like as long, like, I don't know if it's been 30 or 40 years. But once
you've had really good, pure, clean resin heads, whether it's water sifted or dry sifted, you don't want to look back.
No, it's impossible. It destroyed me. People are like, when's the last time you smoked cannabis? I'm like, I don't know, like 15 years ago, I think. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, for real. This stuff is...
I have to say thanks for letting us and understand that's what we need.
No, Marcus loves great cannabis, but it's a messenger, not the message.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I learned that, you know, as much from puffing. I learned it from industrial hemp and all the commercial uses, and how you never just threw the whole plant in and got the product you were looking for. You always took the one from the whole, whether it was, you know, essential amino acid rich seed from the embryos, or whether it was fiber from the stalk or cellulose from the stalk. Generally, we were separating them from the whole to produce these different products. And I saw the same thing with the medicine. If that's what you wanted to use it for, it seemed to be also the benefits, whether you want to call it medically or recreationally, adult use, whatever, they were like magnified and way clearer. Like a clarity was achieved that sort of was different from the muddiness that I got when I was inhaling plant matter wrapped in paper, you know, sealed with glue. Right. It's just a different sort of feeling. So I am very thankful, Sam, for both your place in water extraction and in dry sifting, because wow, talk about sharing a good thing with the world.
Yes.
It's nice to be able to do it on your own.
Yeah, I just want to add real quick before we move on.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I just want to add real quick before we move on that, you know, when I talk you got to realize I have a very tunnel vision focus on a percentage of the medical cannabis population out there. That we're talking is maybe 2% of the market, you know. So when we talk about, it's just not as easy as black and white as, oh, we're going to be Robin Hood and give everything away and go out of business, or we're going to be a greedy, you know, businessman. Of course, it doesn't work that way. I'm talking about a very small percentage of the marketplace that is terminal, potentially terminal or critical. And we can all talk about how those people can be treated, and I think we can treat them in the cannabis community individually and help support and lift up those people who are going through the most horrific conditions you can imagine, and not make a dent in any of the entrepreneurial sort of spirit and benefits that can happen out of working with cannabis, which I think is great. I think it's so the people who are listening realize that I'm talking about people who are, you know, might not be here next year if we don't come together and try to support and help them. And that's kind of what I talk about. So when I'm talking about patients, you know, and you can look at some of the kids we work with, you can look at my own son and how intense his condition is. It's not a joke. I mean, a lot of people just haven't really experienced that level of illness. But, you know, that's really where I'm coming from when I talk about I don't feel that should be someone's primary focus for an area to profit. When you look at the horrors of rare epilepsy or childhood cancer or epidermolysis bullosa, which I talked about last time I was on the show. I mean, these are people who you see that level of suffering. It's just like, oh, okay, you know, what can we do to help not keep information from them, not manipulate those families? It's just an ethical line that I think shouldn't be crossed, and I'll leave it with that.
I'll say that was my foundation in all of this as well, coming out to BC, and my only friend that I really knew out here was Hillary Black, and she was kind of in the middle of, do I move down to California and go stay with Todd, or as they had just come back from Amsterdam from living there together, or do I stay in BC and sort of build this, you know, compassion club that I have on my mind? And so she decided to stay in BC, start the compassion club. This was around 97, and it was really for people that were terminal. So, you know, the original days of the compassion club, everyone was terminal. Lots of people were passing away every week, every month. It was like, wow, like this is really heavy shit. Like getting to know these people in the end of their lives. I got to know them because I was one of the first growers for the BC Compassion Club, and I would grow cannabis and basically sell it at a loss to the market, I was just like,
Right.
I can't charge market prices. This is fucked up. And also because these people that were at the end of their lives at this time that were going to the BC Compassion Club were also, you know, poverty stricken. A lot of them were living out on the streets. A lot of them didn't have money. And it was just, it was incredible to see Hillary just with the highest integrity help these people when she herself came from a very good upbringing, you know, in a sort of wealthy neighborhood with a lot of abundance. And for her to sacrifice that in her, you know, really, I mean, early 20s and to become selfless was a pretty huge deal. I mean, the BC Compassion Club today wouldn't be what it is without Hillary Black, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think.
Hey, it saved my life. It's where I learned how. It's where I found the beautiful brownies after my accident. I went to the British Columbia Compassion Club Society. I found decarboxylated cannabis in a brownie type form, and it completely changed my whole thought on how cannabis helped me as a medicine coming out of the hospital. And the BCCS was a big part of my recovery. And it was the starting of where I learned where cannabis was truly a medicine. I totally agree, and you know, you're a big part of that, Mark. And I think that's awesome. You guys did what you did there for patients. It was really a great place to meet. They had the whole facility of education on natural pain control to Reiki to all kinds of things next door at the Wellness Center. It was quite awesome. They did a lot for patients and still do every day.
That's incredible.
They led by example for all of us to see, to learn, and also to follow.
Absolutely, you know, and Hillary now works with some pretty large companies. She was with Bedrocan, which got bought up by Canopy, I believe. I believe they own that now. And so, you know, you have people sort of saying, oh, you know, how could she go work for these big, you know, basically people, you know, saying that these are the bad companies that are trying to trap people and, you know, sell them their products and this, that, and the other thing. But you know, I stand by Hillary that having someone with a high integrity like Hillary in their ear, you know that she's going to direct them in the best possible way. I definitely have faith in her, and the way she straddles those both worlds of the Compassion Club and of the licensed producer in Canada is not an easy job. And there's not many people that can actually do it. Once you usually jump over to that one side, you've lost this side completely. And Hillary's maintained a foot in both arenas, so it's pretty impressive.
I believe in both approaches.
Yeah.
Cannabis can be beneficial to man, and whether it's through big business, through the 7-Eleven, or through mom and pop helping people, I believe in all approaches that use cannabis.
Yeah,
Great.
I'm definitely also in the sense when people are like, how can you promote LPs? I say, well, I'm not promoting LPs per se as much as I'm promoting access, and LPs are access. So that to me is off the table. All the rest of the shit you guys are upset about, by all means, you know, fight and scream and yell about. But I've been screaming for access for 25 years, and I'm not going to cut off any access that we've gained because they don't like the opposite. Just fight for the opposite, gain more access, but don't go and attack access that's already in place for people that are using it. That's fucked up.
Yeah, because what it really boils down to, better for who, for what? I mean,
That's it. And if
straight people may not want to smoke it, they may want to spray it under their tongue or stick in a suppository, and they should have that right to deliver it how they want.
It's true. And Irv Rosenfield, when he came in, the one of two federal patients in America, good friend of Todd's and some of the other panelists, and he put it into perspective when we were all being like, oh, we got to get Irv the bomb. We need to get him the good oil and the good bubble hash. And he's like, listen, guys, I know you're laughing about my Mississippi grown swag, but it works for me. It's given me a good quality of life, and it works. And I was just like, damn, shit, yeah. It's like, that's right.
What matters.
It's more access. It's just crazy how the human brain thinks sometimes when we don't. It's like, I don't like the way that access is. We need to destroy. It's like, no, we don't need to destroy anything. Why don't you build something new over here, and it can exist simultaneously as what someone else built over here that's obviously helping some people.
That's been one of the favorite things that I've been able to do that has been rewarding is, you know, we have long-term cultivators and long-term businessmen who have been doing things for a long time. But the majority of these people that I find have come into the cannabis world because of some sort of injury or some sort of health thing that they've been treating, and they always use cannabis to treat that issue. But as we start working with them and I started talking to them more, they might not have been keeping up with the science of cannabis and how the things that we're learning right now. It's just exciting. It's every day we learn something new. And one of the most rewarding things that I've had happen lately is some people that we're working with who are always smoking cannabis. But when we start talking about what they've been using it for all these years, it looks like more symptoms of what might be a clinical cannabinoid deficiency disorder, like Dr. Ethan Russo has really pioneered and started showing. So we start working with those like, hey, you've used cannabis this way your whole life. Why don't you try this and start looking at more of a consistent supplement, start looking at the cannabinoids that would help with what they're dealing with, whether it be neuropathic pain or other sort of issues, and setting them up with more of a supplement to keep those levels consistent, which is what seems to work best with those clinical cannabinoid deficiencies. I've seen it completely change their life. People who've been in cannabis for a long time having a new understanding of how to all the different ways that you can approach cannabis as a medicine is opening their eyes as to how much better even their own treatment can be with what they're doing, depending on what they're having. And I've had a couple businessmen where that's happened with, and now they smoke or do other things as they need for when it's appropriate, but they've added new tools to their box to be able to take care of the conditions they're working with. And I've seen some pretty amazing results.
I think that's cool you say that. You know, a lot of people seem to feel that cannabis is going to cure the, overwhelming symptom of life, and it really won't. I mean,
yeah,
we will die someday. It's just inevitable. But the quality of life, the way we can appreciate our time with others, how we can embrace this in a healthy, or at least the most healthy way possible, in a way is really what cannabis represents to me. I mean, it's never going to cure my spinal fusion, but it can help me tolerate my spinal fusion throughout my life so I don't turn to more abusive or worse substances. I mean, when I was only 12, I was given my second mini bike, and I went, I'm bouncing trails and, riding all these whoops, and my neck's bouncing around and my neck hurt. And when my doctor said to me, try smoking pot, it's not your worst option. I was only 12, but, it was a few years after he'd already seen me benefit from it during chemotherapy and radiation therapy. So he was being a smartass, but he wasn't being a smartass, because what he followed it up with, Todd, if I start prescribing you opiates, you're just going to become mentally and physically addicted to them.
Yeah.
And the pain's never going to go away. And it really hit me like, wow. And, learning how to, learning martial arts, learning how to take care of myself, exercise, be proactive and mitigating the pain was really a whole part of the holistic approach cannabis brought in.
Yes. Well, and that's it. It's about having all those options for you to be able to deal with that in a healthy way to improve your quality of life. I mean, if we're having neuropathic pain, then, a cream or a tincture that is made correctly could be, in addition to what you're doing, could really increase the efficacy and give you a better quality of life. And so many folks were just focused on one application. And now that we learn more and more about how cannabis works with the CB2 receptors in your skin and how it regulates the flow of glutamate and other things that deal with pain and neuropathic pain, it's incredible to have people add these other applications to their treatment. And again, what it's all about, just improve their daily quality of life.
Yeah, when shatter and butters and all these incredibly potent concentrates and extracts started hitting the market, the first thing that I really saw that they did was they proved safety and effectivity. Because I mean, whereas a joint was great, and I'd watch Elvie Musica, one of the women that get legal marijuana, smoke joint after joint after joint to help mitigate, the pain and the headaches from her glaucoma. She would do a dab and she would sit there content for quite a while, not needing to chain smoke, not needing to go back and go back and go back. But and that really showed me how effective a high dose of cannabinoids can be to somebody who's really suffering. Where a joint's a great Band-Aid, you start dabbing and it suddenly becomes a remedy, in some ways, and that is something I never thought of in the way of, hashish was always more consistent than cannabis. And that's why I always thought it would be a better medicine. But as we move forward,
the safety and the effectivity of what we're doing now with extracts, to me, really proves how incredibly important cannabis is, how safe cannabis is, and how effective it can be for a variety of conditions.
And so subtly so. I'll say, you know, one of my experiences of not puffing for those 8 days, and then just yesterday having my first rip in 8 days after traveling. Reset. Yeah, it was a reset. I went away with my family, and I wasn't bothering looking for it. I didn't feel I needed it, and I was fine. There was, you know, no negative feelings whatsoever. But when I had that first puff, the clarity and the feeling of the subtlety of what being high or elevated or stoned or whatever you want to call it is a very powerful thing. There's an incredible amount of energy in there, from its, you know, simplicity to its absolute benignness, to the fact that if you ate enough of it, you could probably, you know, do surgery on someone. Like, you could put someone in a coma with it. Like, it is powerful stuff. It's incredible. Yeah. The spectrum, you know?
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of research on high THC dabs and concentrates, trying to really, because I have this, when we're working with kids and some of the conditions we're looking at, I would qualify under the clinical endocannabinoid deficiency disorders umbrella. And for those who aren't familiar with that, that's, you know, fibromyalgia, MS, probably maybe epilepsy might not even be under there, but they're still looking at that, you know, or conditions where rheumatoid arthritis, irritable bowel syndrome, these are conditions where it looks to be that the body has a inability in one of the three systems in the endocannabinoid system to process, you know, the natural cannabinoids, 2-arachidonyl glycerol and anandamide. So we see these people who have multiple conditions like rheumatoid arthritis, and they get migraine, and they get this. All of these are a symptom of the body, a malfunction within that endocannabinoid system. They're not producing the endocannabinoids, or they're not able to take them in. Well, the concern, and where I've been doing a lot of research wanting to help better my understanding, maybe you guys have some thoughts on this, is when you're dealing with endocannabinoid deficiencies, you're always trying to get the body back to that. You're looking to supplement that those endocannabinoids at a level that mimics what the body should be producing naturally is the theory. And where we get with the high doses of any cannabinoid, whether it be CBD or CBG or THC, the concern or the thought that Ethan Russo put forward was that that's where tolerance happens, right? And tolerance is the downregulation of the CB1 receptors, so that the body essentially thinks that it's overproducing anandamide and it's overproducing polyethanolamide or 2-arachidonyl glycerol. So it starts shutting down CB1 receptors so that it's not what it considers to be taking in too many of them.
Can I throw a thought in though? You know, It's almost like the more we learn about cannabinoids and the more we learn that they benefit us in ways that we can't even see, the more it kind of makes me think that the fact that we have this and we get immune to it, the fact that we stop getting high, it almost allows it to work as a medicine. Because for me, at least, I mean, I've always consumed a lot of cannabis. 18 would tell you from the day he met me, I was always smoking ridiculous amounts of cannabis. But it was because I felt like I had to in order to keep my neck pain in check.
Right.
And also, in a weird way, to keep me from being too high to deal with being in life. I mean, because if it was alcohol and I was drinking from morning till night, I would just be useless. But with cannabis, I can actually consume day and night and not be useless at all, and actually not really get as high as I did the first time I got high. But at the same time, who gives a shit? I'm able to maintain my life. I'm able to take care of myself. I'm able to do all these great things because cannabis has put me in this kind of normal space.
Well, that's the thought. I think that's exactly it. And I think that's why when I think people who benefit, or I'm starting to notice in trying to hash these thoughts out so we have a better understanding, is people who benefit from those high doses of THC. It's because they're saturating their body with THC, which is a known modulator of pain in the body. So that they have this benefit to where they start to shut down. So my point was, where I was trying to get was that tolerance in a lot of ways is something that we have to be aware of, but can actually be 100% beneficial, because when you need a saturated system of THC, and this is a problem we see with cancer as well. It's very difficult to get for a lot of people because they don't like the experience of too much THC in the body or being over high. But as you start to downregulate those CB1 receptors, you're able to then consistently saturate the body without the psychoactive effect. And people say, no, I can do this and be fine, because they've been able to you have to almost condition the body to be able to take that in, and that is going to modulate that pain better than any other dose, because you're able to get really quick into the system, high levels of THC that can then regulate those pain receptors. Whereas other folks might need a different approach. So I think it's really interesting as we learn more about this to see how people kind of naturally find the right application of cannabis just based on experience and what's working for them. And now we're starting to understand how and why that works. I think it's a really exciting time to be working with cannabis right now.
Absolutely. Think of how opposite that statement is compared to almost any other opiate or other drug that we would use, because it doesn't matter what else they give us. The more we use it, the less effective it's going to be.
Right. And the more dangerous it becomes.
Absolutely. Right. And then the more desperate of a situation it puts people in, because if they found that it was a remedy and then suddenly it stops working as a remedy, they feel hopeless.
Yeah. This is where I said in the beginning, I don't think you're quite with us yet, that this is why I believe to the core of my body that in the topic of cannabis, we have the moral and ethical high ground. It's just finding the people who can articulate it well, and working with a family member of ours who had been completely strung out on opioids over the course of 30 years because of a back fusion and some other things. They walked into our house in a walker and couldn't hardly walk because of the arthritis and the other issues that were caused. And just by giving them some of the cream we make for our kids with EB, which took us a long time to develop, but is effective, he walked out of the house without his walker 45 minutes later. And within a year, he's off opioids completely with just a topical cream that is able to get right to the source of the pain. This is not a question of what's safer for our community. There's no doubt whatsoever. We just have to have a big education campaign on our plate to get people to understand it.
But how can we protect the children? That's what their argument is constantly now. Yeah. You've noticed it's constantly, but we need to protect the children. I'm like, protect the children from what?
No, now we have to legalize to protect the children, because all our kids are friggin' sick because of all the bad decisions we've been making in our environment with our food.
What about the young adults that want to get high? If we give them too much CBD, it'll be hard for them to get high.
It's pretty crazy.
Well, I mean, that's where I think this is where I become
young adults.
I think this is where I become a thorn in the side locally, because it's exactly that, Marcus, that I challenge full force. I confront those arguments head on, because, I realize I have a platform that forces people to listen to me more that other people don't have. And I don't want to waste that, and I don't want to not acknowledge it, but we don't value human suffering in this country. So if you're an adult and you're suffering, or you have cancer or intractable pain, which is the terminology that a lot of people deal with, they don't care. It's so easy for people to write them off in their head and have this cognitive dissonance that they're probably just wanting to get high and it's not real. But you can't look away from suffering children. A seizure is physical, it's real, you can see it, you can see the suffering, you can get the experience of the horror of watching it, you can feel that uncomfortableness. And then as a father, everyone understands the need to protect your kids. So it gives me an ability to attack those old ideological nonsense arguments head on from a perspective that people feel like they have to listen a little more. And I think that's why we've been so successful up here in our local county with some of our work, is just constantly addressing that and attacking that, from having a platform that people aren't as easily able to just dismiss me on, because these are old, silly, ridiculous arguments, and when they say, what about the children? And I'm standing there with pictures of my child whose life depends on cannabis, that argument starts to sound really silly.
Yeah, it's definitely a unique place that you come from, the foundation. I always sort of have said the people that come from that's their foundation in how they educated themselves and learned about cannabis, particularly as a medicine for their child, it's a unique perspective, and it sort of, to me, creates like what I think of as the people who are the most trusted or the realist. It's like this, they don't have this other agenda. It's like, this was all about my child. This is why I learned. This is why I'm trucking forward to teach other people, because this is working for us. It's, it's righteous.
Yeah, it is what it is, definitely. But I think it just helps get the conversation down to an honest discussion. What is really important, and how are we going to regulate it? And I do local work and on the state level as well. One of the analogies that I found has worked a lot, and I continue to use, is that and a lot of people are probably going through this. And here in California, I know, but all across the country, as we fight for legalization and fight for cannabis rights, you're having, hopefully, those of you out there are going to your local city council meetings and going to your local county board meetings, and constantly having to argue if you're going to allow cannabis in your community. And the very first point I make is how unethical and how immoral a question that even is. And if you put it in the context of, would I have to sit in a city council meeting and ask permission to, if we are going to give kids insulin who have critical diabetes, or if you even want to take what they consider to be dangerous drugs, if we were going to allow a dispensary, aka pharmacy, to dispense opioids to kids or adults who had just had surgery or a limb amputated, we would be looking at that as a ridiculous, immoral conversation of neglect of human suffering. Yet we're totally comfortable talking about cannabis in the same terms of if we were going to allow these people to have it. Well, the science is in, the argument is over for anyone paying attention. And there are people in our community whose life literally depends on cannabinoid therapies. And the discussion isn't if we're going to have it in our communities. The only discussion that is moral and ethical to have is how are we going to have this in our communities? How are we going to regulate it, or how are we going to manage it so that people feel safe and comfortable? But at the same time, the bottom line is it needs to be provided, period. Just like we would with insulin in children, just like we would with other critical drugs or EpiPens or other things that could be potentially misused, even opioids. But we know there's a place for them in our society because we've learned what it's like without them.
And those regulations, they need to be also, in the way we were talking earlier, the way the fine line gets pushed against the wall in different aspects. In regulations, more often than not, they over-regulate and they control things to the point where, you can only have this and it can only be in this milligram dose. And it needs to be regulated for safety's purposes, but openly, as a nice, wide, vast, broad swipe of what's available. So everything is available in all forms. And those are the kind of regulations.
It needs to be regulated by someone who has even the slightest education in cannabis, which unfortunately a lot of times, in my experience, the lawmakers don't. They're going off old ideology and fear, and they're really it's just regulating control. They just want to essentially. I don't know what the experience is for everyone else, but I assume it's relatively common that a lot of these regulations are really quasi, how do we limit and control this as much as we can because we don't want this evil herb in our communities, and it's just nonsense. It really doesn't apply to the real world of cannabis whatsoever. So they set systems up to fail, and then they say, see, we tried to have a cultivation ordinance, but nobody could follow the rules with our ridiculous setbacks or all these other things that they set up to try to trap people, and then they blame the community for it.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting predicament. It's hard to, from someone like myself who grew up in Prohibition and I knew Prohibition fairly well. I still recognize it. Not that I myself am trapped within its confinements quite to the extent as I used to be, only within my own country. Once I leave the country, then I'm out of the safety zone, but federally exempt in my own company to grow and process and use cannabis. And it's just... lost my train of thought there. I'm pretty medicated. Hey, welcome D420K. That's what I was going to say.
Does my mic work?
Dude, I can't hear you.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
Mark, only you, man. Only you know how to do it.
Oh, shit, dude.
How does the mic work? Is it nice and clear?
Dude, I was telling Forrest earlier how he's like inspired more than half the freaking panelists. I think Etienne, you, myself, Johnny B, and Todd all have new mics.
There you go.
I can hide behind it.
In fact, Tony does as well if he comes in later.
It's called the Yeti because it's so fucking big.
The Yeti.
Yeah, the Yeti.
Thanks, man. You inspired everybody.
That
Mark,
must
you
be.
just sent the link. You're like, you got to get this, John, next week. Yeah.
So do we gotta mute this still all the time? Is that still the procedure?
It's a good procedure.
Okay.
I also do recommend if you do, there's a little foam cover that helps cut down on the wind and such that you can get to for your pieces as well.
A condom for the.
Gotta say it, Darren.
A helmet. Helmet cover.
It just keeps it just keeps noise down, so you're just hearing the voice.
How about we do a bong rip?
There you go.
Boom.
Let's
I think that's very doable. What do you
Thank
think,
you.
gentlemen?
I think it's a bong rip, and then I'm jumping out of here. I got
everybody else out in the audience, let's do one great big bong rip for everybody. This is for all the guys in jail, everything that are in prison, going through hard times. This is bong rips for all of you. Go.
I wonder if anyone's watching Hash Church in prison. Todd says no. Not even on like a little smartphone in their cell with a little earbud.
Oh, that would be fucking pretty ridiculous. You could slip set. They're pulling cell phones out of prisons all the time.
That's what I'm saying.
So it's not totally, and then there's prison guards too. They sit around and do nothing while they're babysitting.
I'm sure there's a few people on it.
I'm going to say good day, guys.
doing it on their cell phone.
Whoa.
What was that?
That was Sam talking too close to his microphone.
Oh, they could do it on their cell phone.
That's better.
That's what I was thinking. I would like to think that, that someone in jail just got that shout out from D420K and it literally made their day better.
I was just thinking of the ones that are incarcerated for weed offenses unjustly and that sort of thing.
Yep.
Just a bit of a shout out to them.
There's no shortage.
Hey, there were 3,500 new ones last year. It came out in some statistics. 3,500 new federal people went to jail for marijuana.
Well, not
We've had over 100 charges.
They sent 3,500 United States citizens to jail in federal prison.
Correct.
Yeah. So those cases could have been going on for years, like mine did.
In the last few weeks in Toronto, they've arrested and charged over 100 people working in dispensaries and stuff like that, between the cannabis clinics and the cannabis cultures and all the dispensaries that are being raided all across Canada. There's so many charges pending to all of these people that were supplying patients. It's really hard.
A colossal waste of money.
Colossal waste. I mean, I took my charges. I got my stuff from Health Canada. You get a cover letter, and I put it all together, nice little package. Got hold of Crown Prosecutor in Alberta, faxed them all the information, and hopefully, cross my fingers, they'll just drop the charges. So, you know what?
This is insane that they're charging people and clogging up the courts. In the meantime, are they not releasing a bunch of people from like prison that Dana Larson recently wrote about in the Huffington Post, and how what was it that they don't have the money or the
I missed it. I didn't read it.
Mark's mic cuts out.
Sorry.
All this good conversation about great mics.
It was basically a Huffington Post story that Dana Larson wrote recently in regards to how they're going after the Emerys and busting dispensaries, yet they don't have the time or the money to focus on a bunch of violent criminals like murderers and rapists and shit that they're going to let out of jail.
Hey, how about this? All those fentanyl deaths that happened in Vancouver, they wound up charging one of the dealers, and he got 14 years in prison for killing over 670 people, in my opinion. I mean, that guy got nothing compared to it's ridiculous.
Well, think about it. He got 14 years. My mentor, Ron Hickey, did 11 years for
growing a
cannabis.
plant. It's just insane.
Fucked up.
On that note, guys, I got to take off. I got family coming over today and stuff like that. Love you all. Peace and love. We'll see you next week. And Mark, let's get together, and we'll see everybody soon.
Peace,
Hey,
Johnny.
thanks, Johnny
Peace,
B.
guys.
Have a great day.
Take care, John.
Cool, very cool. Well, cannabis. Hash Church, we love cannabis. 767 viewers watching right now. We got the chat room going off, saying goodbye to Johnny B. Where's Todd? Todd is in the room. He's right here. Sometimes Todd needs to come in an hour after opening.
Yeah. 18 had me out driving around.
Right. You guys went and saw
Patton Oswalt.
Patton Oswalt, right. Is he the guy that does the voice for the narration of the Goldbergs?
I didn't know who the hell he was, so you'd have to refer that.
Oh, you didn't know who he was?
Social friend.
Isn't he a comedian?
He was kind of at times. At times, not so much.
Interesting.
Yeah, he does voiceovers, books, and he's a comedian. Man, he had me in stitches last night, needless to say. But yeah, we had a good time.
Good fun. Good fun.
High times in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. That's funny. A funny old picture of me and Marble Slinger from 20 years ago sent to me. We look pretty darn young wearing our bubble bag shirts 17 years ago, 18 years ago. I would say it was at Mark Emery's Toker's Bowl, which I have to say back then at the time were some of the best cannabis gatherings I'd ever gone to. I was like, damn, Mark knows how to do it. This is proper. Quite fun gatherings. It just was such a neat feeling always to be able to, there's also an importance, I think, one of the main reasons why it's, so hard for people like Forrest to have to learn about all this through, a sick child, try and funnel through all the education and meet the right people and learn about what you really need to learn about. It's very difficult in that sense to, lost my train of thought again. Damn, that 8-day delay.
What are you smoking? Because I would like a little.
Dude, I'm smoking some strawberry banana, some of that pine tar kush dry sift. I know.
I was like thinking I'm on.
Oh, you know what I was going to say? I was going to bring it back to the sort of importance of normalization. Why it's so difficult for people to have to learn about, this through a sick child is because there is not enough normalization of cannabis use, and that it's still looked at by certain, facets of society as like, oh my God, like, what do you mean you're going to smoke and then get in a vehicle and drive? You can't do that. It's like, oh, trust me, if I couldn't, I wouldn't.
Right.
Just point to X Games, Just point to X Games. Watch the guy doing the backflip on the dirt bike. Just did a bong hit, turns out.
It's true enough. Just watch the X Games. Yeah, that's pretty good.
I think that normalization is just because it's amazing how entrenched in our societies just this old rhetoric is. We had my daughter came home upset because they had a huge thing in class about how cannabis was just as addictive as heroin and all these other things, and that Dad, is this true? Is what we're doing because we're really open in our work with her brother and things like that. But it's just entrenched, in our society. So sending off a whole bunch of information to the teacher about where its addiction level is much closer to sugar than heroin, and dealing with some of those sort of facts and sending science out. Within 2 days, he got back to me and said, hey, we talked with our board and the principal. We'd like you to come out and do a class for the kids on medicine and education.
That's awesome, dude. That's right there.
Those are the sort of steps it's just constant. It's just a constant battle to help fight that sort of bad information out there, to get people to understand what reality really is.
It's a great disservice. It's not just bad information. It's a great disservice to the community to denormalize and make something seem and confuse and lie to children.
Well, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. I mean, I come from the school of thought that the reason cannabis got its mistaken reputation for a gateway drug is because of that bad information. If you tell kids from day one there's no difference between heroin and crack and cocaine and cannabis, and eventually, as they grow up, they're going to have an experience with cannabis, typically first. Then they're going to try that and say, well, that was bullshit. This is harmless, right? So all this other information I must have got must be bullshit and harmless as well. And I think it leads people to be a little more open to try things maybe that they wouldn't have, because they were just given bad information from the beginning. And if we teach people that there's no difference between meth and pot, when they try cannabis and it's fine, of course they're going to say, well, let's try some of those other things and see if I was lied to about that as well. And again, that's not the plant's fault. That's the people behind it.
Well, this is why DARE was pulled out a lot of classrooms, and
yeah,
thought of, I think, of being a bad idea. Obviously exposing kids to things that they wouldn't have had in their, the stream of thoughts is not exactly the best thing, and I blame the propaganda of the drug war going way back, because these people, I hate to say that I think it was contrived, but when you look back, I mean, I don't believe that they thought the damage they were going to do maybe was what was going to happen. But even when they saw the damage happening and they saw the repercussions of their stupid policies, going into classrooms, teaching their kids stupid shit, they continued to do it, which is the part that really bothers me. I mean, I wonder how many cities still allow DARE to go on.
Yeah, I don't know. But what I heard out of my own kid's school recently made me concerned that it's not as gone as I would like it to be.
Well, I almost wonder if, because of how embarrassing it was, they don't do it overtly anymore, but they do it covertly. My mom, when I was a little kid, she was like, we went through this shit. She held up a little pipe. She goes, well, honey, what is this? I said, it's a bong. She said, no, you don't know what it is. You've never seen it before. Okay, next. Hold up rolling paper. What is this? Oh, those are Easy Widers. No, you've never seen them before. You have no idea what they are. We're a team and they're against us. And I was like, wow, Mom, that's deep. And you know what? This shit started for me when I was like kindergarten, because she was totally, I think, like a stoner, paranoid that I was going to go home and be like, go to school and be like, oh yeah, my mommy has a bong. My mommy has joints. And she was like, hell no, kid. And I think it was a good path to take, because it taught me, it really taught me what more of what the world was really going to be like, instead of lying to me and setting me up for a big disappointment and thinking that, everybody was good and honest.
Yeah, you'd think that they would have a counter program called Truth, and just have people come out and tell exactly, like have someone come out and be like, you know what, when someone tries to talk to you about something about your parents and you feel they're trying to get them in trouble, you just ignore that person, because your loyalty is to your parents always, and your family. Teach them like these sort of core things, and teach them the truth about the things that you're actually lying to them about, because I would take Truth over DARE any day.
Yeah, it was funny. A friend, who everybody knows, whatever, Woody Harrelson, a long time ago, we were smoking pot and playing pool, and his little daughter ran in, and a woman who had never been around us before tried to stop the kid and say, your daddy's smoking a cigarette. And his daughter looked up and said, my daddy don't smoke cigarettes. He only smokes joints, and totally stunned the lady and ran around her and comes up and makes a big laugh about it. And, when the lady came up and asked him later, you let your kid know you smoke pot? And he goes, as a parent, I'm faced with either lying to my child and having them come of age and find out I've been lying to them their whole life, or being honest with them and always being honest with them. And hopefully they will accept me for who and what I am. And I thought that was such a great way to put it. And I always respected him a little more for that. And his kids grew up to be spectacular human beings, of course, So I've always believed honesty was the best policy. My mom, I think, really instilled that into me at a very young age. And, obviously, in a way, she's teaching me, this is not a lighter, and to be dishonest to the teachers. But in a sense, she also taught me, she sat me down and explained so much more to me than maybe a little kid should have had to really understand. But she didn't want to mislead me and make me think that, oh, you're being bad, not letting them know that mommy has Easy Widers at home. But it was important. And, when you read about the drug war and all the families and the kids that inadvertently knocked out their parents without knowing better, it's really sad that their parents didn't sit down and have those honest talks with them too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something we do a lot. We do a lot here is because I'm so heavily entrenched in cannabis and specifically in cannabis in children, which is not something that everyone's commonly tying together. I mean, our whole work is making sure children have access to cannabis. Now, obviously, that's sick children who need it with rare diseases, not just handing it out on the street corner. But that's something, when your daughter is young, how do you teach such a complex issue to kids who are so young? And really, it's just, I firmly believe it's just having an honest discussion. It's being honest.
Don't you think that it's going to be parents like you and my mom and others that are having these, epiphany style events in their life with their kids where, no one's going to come in and tell you different. You're living the experience,
Right.
And how many people are going to have this, and we're going to see them get to a point where they're just as comfortable with our kid getting a cannabinoid pill as they are Ritalin in the middle of the day from their school doctor. And I mean, I think it's just the psychology of medicine that is working against or with us here, because there's such an acceptance for synthetics. They'll think nothing of, give my kid whatever it was prescribed during the day. That's what the doctor said, and I'm off to work. And why should that not be cannabis or something that could really calm a kid down, help the kid focus? I mean, I believe that as we learn to understand our endocannabinoid system way better, that cannabis will become just one of those other drugs that the school nurse passes out during the day to the kids who need it, because we will, as a community, as a whole society, understand that it's much better than what we used to be giving them, say, in the 50s, 60s, 70s and on.
Well, yeah, that's it. I mean, that's it. I mean, one of the talks that I do, and I do a lot of different lectures and kind of cater them to who I'm speaking with, but one of those is absolutely helping people connect those dots. I don't think people realize that we already give kids medicinal methamphetamines. I don't think people realize that we already give kids medicinal heroines and opioids. And if you were to lay those out, if you were to give, and we have talks where we'd say, if you were to want to have something help your child, would you prefer it be methamphetamine, heroin, or a cannabinoid? And a lot of the crowds respond, well, that's crazy. No one would give meth to a child. It's like, well, I beg to differ. Let's talk about what Adderall is. Let's look at its molecular construction. Absolutely, we give meth to children. Absolutely, we give these other heavy narcotics to children. So let's just put it in context. But I think there's just some dissociation where if it comes from a guy in a lab coat who is, they have no idea how the pharmaceutical company interacts with doctors. They're really naive to that whole process. But still, if it comes from a guy in a lab coat and I can pick it up at a pharmacy, it's obviously safe and it's obviously okay. And, when we got our first prescription for phenobarbital for my son, I knew right away that this was something that was not okay. This is not something that is good. Even if it is a life or death situation, that cannot be the only option. Yet most folks don't realize the drugs that they're giving their kids are medicinal versions of drugs far more toxic and dangerous than cannabis.
Yeah, and they'll give it to these kids at a very, very young age. Some of these powerful things like benzos, which have intense withdrawal syndromes and are not easy to get off of. It's definitely bizarre.
Yeah, you want to see a kid get high, and I've seen kids get high. Give them a good 6 milligram rectal shot of Diastat, which is a heavy benzo. That's getting kids high. Give them heavy shots of phenobarbital for months on end. That's getting kids high. I work with parents and have been one where we end up having to call rehab centers and withdrawal clinics because the kids are shaking and seizing by trying to get them off of these medications. And I've had experiences where I've called these places and I say, hey, I need some advice. How do we withdraw from these drugs? And the first thing they ask is, well, how old's the patient? And when I say 5, they hang up. They won't even talk to you to be considering giving those sort of drugs to children. And they don't want to say, I didn't do this as some sort of freak experiment. I was given this from our doctor. There's just a real lack of understanding what we're really doing as far as safe pharmaceutical medicinal treatments.
It's interesting you say that because, it turned my mom into being like an amateur doctor herself, because trying to learn everything and learn, how to become part of my healing process was what my mom really wanted to be part of, because she felt like the doctors were failing her so very much. And I think a lot of people are getting to that point where they're kind of trying to learn how to self-medicate themselves with cannabis for whatever it is life is messing with them over, you know?
Yeah.
Hey, can I bring this up too? You know, this, I was reading this story's a couple years old, but I was just, you know, looking up some stuff and about hyperemesis, the syndrome where people are, you know, supposedly getting sick over cannabis. And this article, I posted it in our chat, but, you know, they're talking about azetrol and and the other one was Azamax, which are organic pesticides that are really, really, really pushed in, you know, almost all grow shops. I mean, they sell like crazy. And if this is, you know, true that, you know, you're getting into this as it being a pesticide poisoning, I think it's really something worth chatting about. And I was wondering if anybody, especially you know, Scaldone, if this is something you bumped into yet, bro, because it seems like.
No, I've read this and I've seen the articles about it and people have asked me about it, but I don't know about it in particular. But this material is one of the materials that's on the so-called 15B list. I think that's the accurate name or number of the list. But these are what are called minimum risk pesticides. Most of them are natural oils and extracts and whatnot. I don't know about this particular poisoning, though. I think that there's a few things that might be causing this thing. I'm not sure that it's specifically due to this stuff. It's not long-lived. I don't know if it's systemic, but it's something that, again, if you're applying it late in your harvest, it's going to show up in your concentrate. So I would just assume, again, don't do anything within 3 weeks of making concentrates from plants, because they're going to leave some residual behind.
Well, even more so if you're gonna, if you know, even more so, we have to be considerate about the fact that most of the stuff is being used to make extracts, and you're going to extract what you're putting on, especially, you know, if it has, you know, an oil base, it's going to come with it, and it's going to be.
I've heard that someone out there actually intentionally dosed weed with neem oil to look to see when that weed would get them feeling like they actually would throw up. I don't recommend doing this at home, but so yeah, I mean, neem will make you get sick. There's no question about it.
It's a hormone
and I think applying it to a plant and then looking for some acute effect is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about here is applying it at some time during the growth, and then whether or not there's still residuals that could be responsible for this hyperemesis effect or not.
Interestingly enough, in the article that I cited to you guys in the chat room there, he actually talks about exposing himself to it and feeling like he got sick and giving it a test because he was starting to feel like it could be these organic natural pesticides. And that's kind of what hit me, because, you know, we only have ourselves to experiment on.
Right.
You know, Sasha Sheldon
but just
was
applying
famous.
neem oil to yourself is just not the right.
No, he's not using neem. No, well, neem's a different conversation. But in this article that I just sent you, he actually talks about putting Azamax and Azetrol on his plants and feeling sick and stuff. So he was trying to see if he could replicate how he felt, because look, I have a hard time believing that it's pure cannabis causing people to get sick, because if it was pure cannabis, with the amount of people who use cannabis worldwide, we would see more of it.
And it would be more prevalent. That's right. Absolutely.
What's happening is people that have a certain sensitivity to a certain chemical are bumping into a certain chemical that's used in cannabis production, and that could be the trigger. And that, to me, chemical sensitivity and chemical that who knows what drugs they're on, and if you're on XYZ drug and you suddenly get exposed to this, suddenly you're puking here at the ER, I can buy that, you know. But and this stuff is commonly used. I mean, I've been growing a long time, and I can honestly say Azamax and Azetrol are everywhere. Anybody watching in the chat that goes into a grocery store is going to be like, yeah, always see it. And if that's the case, I'm not surprised that these things are popping up more and more, because now that more and more people are growing, more and more people are trying to protect their investments to, you know, bring the crop home. And, you know, this shit's going to disappear to them as soon as they sell it. And there's not enough of them that are actually regulated, that are in a situation where if their pot is tainted, they will get recalled.
Exactly, which we just had here in Canada, and all the people on the dispensary side of the argument, which is insane because there's no really sides, it's an illusion, are like, see, they're selling toxic weed. And it's like, no, the thing to look at is see, they got caught and they have to recall it. That's the thing to look at. It's not about, and of course, now you're able to not support that company if you so choose to, you know, but that's why these regulations are in place in the first place, to protect people from companies or individuals that would try to protect their own investment. God forbid, you know, let people do that shit all the time. And they spray something that they shouldn't be, or they, you know, then you're going to get caught here in the federal system. You're going to get caught. And that's why
let me say, this is something, when you say that, Mark, this is the alternative to what you shouldn't spray, because these things are listed as OMAI, organic and everything. This is the scary part to me, is that this is sold as the organic alternative. This is sold, this, don't use Avid, use this. And this is, if this is true, this is shitty, because this is we're getting bad information stemming from the people that are giving us advice over the counter when we're buying this. And if most of the people walking in are not, you know, haven't been growing weed for 25 friggin' years, they're asking advice. And when they ask advice and somebody goes, here's your solution, shit. That's why I bring it up.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I mean, it makes sense to me. I mean, I've looked at it quite a bit because it's something that I wanted to be up on in working with the kids that we're working with. And if you look at the metabolism rate of certain pesticides and cannabis, the symptoms of cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome make total sense for it to be likely a buildup of other toxins in the system, i.e., you know, some of these organic pesticides, because the symptoms that these people have are, you know, severe chronic pain and chronic, you know, pain in the torso and in the gut, along with vomiting. And really what ties it all together is they have this urge to take hot showers. So I don't know if you guys have read about that, right? And they have to get in the shower, and something about the heat relaxes part of the body that helps with the pain. And then they smoke cannabis. So the cannabinoids then help with the pain for the metabolism time of cannabis, the time it takes to metabolize those cannabinoids, which is somewhere around 4 to 6 hours. But the other compounds stay in the body longer. So they tend to then, just as soon as those effects start to wear off, they get, again, the toxic effects of the pesticides that leads to continued vomiting and nausea and all those sort of things that go along with it. So what do? They take in more of the cannabis to try to help it, but what they're really doing is continuing to build up those toxic levels in the body. And I've read recently that some scientists are now going to take some of this, some of these theories of pesticide poisoning and do some studies on them. So I'm hoping within a year or two we can really get definitive answers as to what's going on. But it really makes, when I read the kind of anecdotal study that guy did, you know, of getting his cannabis tested and trying it without these other compounds, and his hyperemesis syndrome went away, it made perfect sense to me. And looking at the description of what they're going through, it just sounds like, you know, it absolutely makes sense that these people are just getting another sort of, they have a sensitivity to some of these compounds, and it's building up in their system because of their use. You know?
What we're also seeing is, you know, in the meat and dairy industry, one of the things I criticize most is preventive use of antibiotics. They don't no longer use them to treat an affected cow or animal. They preventively dose these things, which is putting it into our system. And you see growers doing this too. You see them using these chemicals in perfectly healthy crops because they think that it's part of the preventive maintenance program that they've developed in their fucking head. So they pre-poison the plants so they won't have problems. And those people need to really kind of be someone that, because there's to me so much bad information when it comes to growing, especially large scale. And, you know, the larger the scale, the larger the problems if you start to have them. And, you know, so people start looking for massive solutions. And again, I think that unfortunately it goes unseen when we buy our cannabis, and we're exposed to chemicals that we probably wouldn't have used in our own garden.
I think one of the real challenges that are happening with pesticides and various controls for pests in cannabis is that most of the organic certifications aren't done on crops that are being concentrated and made into oils or vaporized and inhaled. And these chemicals that, like neem, when you heat it, you're getting different compounds than what neem is straight up. People have used neem for thousands of years in India to keep lice off their heads, for example. But it is a hormone disruptor. It's really hard on insects. That's why it's a good control. In our work here, we don't use it anywhere except in the nursery. Because I feel like that's plenty enough time that by the end product is done, there's not going to be any residue or buildup in the plant material. I really don't trust
agree with
many.
that. Can I
Go
just
ahead.
say this though? I don't encourage people to take that theory because you do have systemic, you do have carryover. And with now, especially when you grow sea green, you got to realize that the life cycle of a plant isn't what it is when it's outdoors. I mean, you can, Positronics in Amsterdam, we'd cut the clones. 2 weeks later, they'd have roots. 2 weeks after veg, we'd pop it into flower. And 8 weeks later, we'd be cutting down our flowers. And that's how we recommended to our customers that they grew. So the age of the plant is really not that long. And with the things you use in veg can actually still be there if we're only talking weeks later in flower. So, and more people in production, are doing this. I mean, you can, there's the Jungle Boys on Instagram, they're popping clones in, they're going, 17, 20 days, popping them in the flower, 8 weeks later, they're finished. And this is more common than not when it comes to cultivation. The outdoor guys are kind of becoming, they do their thing too, but in indoor cultivation, your turnover time is so rapid.
Yeah. No, I used to do indoor cultivation, but now it's all outdoor. And I am not able to do much of it these days with the local regulations. But in the time that I have worked outdoors, I'm really stunned at how finding the right cultivars for the conditions that you have and the environment you have in your garden allows the plants to flourish really without any inputs, without having to put anything on the foliage of the plants itself. And if your nursery's clean, by the time you get outdoors and have a full summer into fall for the plants to mature, the right plants don't seem to be bothered by bugs. I know how to find them. Hemp pests and diseases is one of my Bibles, and it's very helpful. But yeah, because of working with patients so many years, I know most of the end users of the plant material that I've made over the years. And I didn't want to take a chance on any of them being compromised by anything that I could put on the plants. So I had to learn how, especially outdoors, there are cultivars of any of the different things that you're looking for in terms of cannabinoids and terpenes that will flourish in this, at least in the environment that I have. Without having to use pesticides
Well, I've been
or
recommending to
fungicides.
people that they get water ionizers because you can use acidic water to remedy bugs to a large degree, and you can use high alkaline water to rinse away any potential powdery mildews or molds that you see. And you can actually use ionized water as a preventive medicine that is, in a sense, not harmful or going to have a lingering effect. And you can also use the machine to drink high alkaline water, and it's good for you too. But I think that now that we're able to use electrolysis and separate acidic and alkaline in the flow of water, we may be able to step away from our use of many of the chemicals, sulfurs, potassium salts, and common organic items that we used to use because we simply won't have to.
I love that line of thought. I think water is a really essential component. That is the foliar spray I use. Basically, it's different types of water. Yeah,
So,
I'd love to learn more about it.
you know, we used to use chemicals to raise or lower our pH. You know, when you were using a garden, you put a little acid and it would lower your pH level. But now they're actually passing the water over titanium plates using electricity, and they use electrolysis. And you can look up the models online. You have little digital readouts. You can pick your pH, and then you can actually have two faucets. One faucet is acidic, one faucet is alkaline. And if you go look a little further, you'll see that there are even hotels in Los Angeles that switched away from chemicals and were using acidic water to clean up any bacteria and to disinfect. And they were using high alkaline water to degrease. So they moved away from chemicals and they were just using waters to clean and disinfect. And you can do that too. I mean, these machines are, they're becoming more common as people understand it better. And for me being a kid, you know, one of the first lessons in, you know, Mel Frank's Grow Book was about pHing your water correctly. And I always kind of wondered why we didn't pH our bodies, you know, like why there was no consideration in our pH of food. And I looked at Coca-Cola, how acidic it was, and I was thinking, this can't be.
It'll eat nails.
I wouldn't pour this on my plant. What the fuck am I doing? You know, so because I had to feed plants, it's what kind of caused me to look at how I feed myself, thankfully. You know, but if you have any questions, you can always hit me up privately. I'd be happy to talk to you about water.
Blessings. I think it's a really essential part of what we're doing. And I've really started thinking of cannabis more and more as a nutraceutical, an actual essential nutrient that we're missing from our diets. And I've actually, in my own head, taken it to the point where I think we evolved to benefit from this plant, and this plant evolved to benefit us. Every year we created new versions of it, and the tribes of people who ate those seeds 1,000 generations of humans ago got the benefit of the omega-3s, which are brain food, and the protein that's in the seeds. And I think it's quite likely, Jack Herrera has suggested, I believe, that it might have taught us agriculture, because any of those seeds that happen to spill out of your hand and fall to the ground in the right circumstance would sprout and make new seeds. Food. Wasn't easy to find food 1,000 generations of humans ago, and 4 generations of humans ago, we started making it harder and harder to get access to it. And yeah, I do. I think of it as an essential nutrient that we've deprived ourselves of. And I do think this hyperemesis thing is toxins that have come to be associated with our efforts to control pests in cannabis. And for years, we've made, many of the folks who have worked with cannabis have made fairly unskillful attempts at controlling pests that show up. And much like in the agricultural industry, we're breeding bugs that are resistant to antibiotics. We're breeding bugs that are resistant to the controls that have been used in cannabis. We're creating new generations of critters.
We've already done
so I'm
that.
really trying to encourage people to build the strength.
Now.
What's that?
We've already done it. We have super spider mites now. I mean, there's no question that we've already grown a lot of bugs that are very accustomed. And this is why we're seeing more and more of these invasive tactics used, especially in bigger commercial gardens. You know, one little spider mite comes in on somebody's sweater and, you know, can take down hundreds of thousands of square feet of garden within a relatively short amount of time. And I'm laughing, but it's not funny when it happens to you and you're the one with the investment and you're the one trying to, you know, get product to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a living nightmare. What would you do in these cases, Sam? Sam, I am only guy in the room who's grown giant fields.
I hate to tell you, but I'm actually the one who brought the first broad mite to California. His name was Floyd, and I had him in a little tiny bottle.
That's so sick.
And I told everybody, come on, give me half of your money off of cannabis or I'm going to release him. They refused, so I let him go.
Well, his offspring has been in our neighborhood.
Floyd.
Floyd.
Speaking of Floyd, an interesting thing came out today from the state. The regulatory costs of the Medical Cannabis Safety Act is estimated to run between $225 and $873 per pound. That looks to be the actual testing that the state's going to actually do. This doesn't include taxes. And it doesn't include the Prop 64 cultivation tax, which is $148 a pound. So it'd be interesting to see what actually transpires there. But this came out today, so I figured people might want that information. So it's looking to be, between $225 and $875 per pound, probably testing for the state.
Just to certify that it's free of pesticides and molds?
If a grower only submits a pound, but what if he submits 1,000 pounds identically grown?
Ooh.
Stay tuned. This one's still writing itself.
That's a serious bill if they just do the old multiplication. Well, we'll just multiply that by 1,000, and you owe $75,000.
Yeah, but if all 1,000 pounds are truly identical, it doesn't seem quite right.
Yeah, well, maybe they could test them all, and if they turned out all identical, you don't get charged.
I just wonder how realistic implementation is really going to be in California on so many levels. The state is huge. It's going to be super expensive. They're going to need a ton of humans, actual humans.
But it must be in place for other things in the state.
Odds. I want to test odds.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot of the work that I'm doing as a patient advocate is funneled and focused on that regulation in California, because there are absolutely ridiculous requirements like the ones you mentioned, and some others with some of their taxing requirements and how they tax things. But I'm meeting with Lori Ajax, who's the head of the Bureau of Medical Cannabis Regulation here in California, who's been charged with setting and helping guide these companies that, or these departments that are now been tasked to regulate cannabis in California. She's kind of the head of that department, and her and I are meeting next week. I'm hoping to continually meet with her to help kind of advocate for some sense, and at the very least advocate for not regulating charitable nonprofit social benefit models completely out of the game, which is the way it's structured right now. So I hear you guys. So I'm getting up there on the front lines trying to help influence that. I did a great lecture for the what was it? Environmental Health Society, like environmental health.
The health regulators for
regulators here in California for all the counties. I was the opening speaker at a 3-day talk they did in Sacramento to try to help just put some sense into how these regulations are being put forth. So that's just on a California level, but I'm hoping that we can have some influence. Our people and the kids that we work with can have some influence to help make some of these regulations a little more sane and benefit everybody in the process.
What is your personal opinion? Do you think anybody who sells this materials for a profit or not, if they're selling it, shouldn't they be regulated?
Well, yeah. I think unfortunately there's a need for some level of regulation. But it's got to be, it's one of those things where we tend to think in very black and white. We either want the Old West, not regulated, which is proven, unfortunately, to be not safe, because when Eagle 20 starts popping up and other things start popping up concentrated in medicines, it's dangerous. And unfortunately, there are people out there that will do that. But at the same time, we don't want some sort of utopian regulation that makes no sense in the real world and forces people into the black market unnecessarily. So it's how do we find that balance of functional, enforceable, and followable? Because I know, I'm not sure how it is everywhere else, but in our community here, we have we want to be above water, right? We want to be legal. We want to not have to be looking over our shoulders. We want to succeed in what, in the next in this next form of cannabis in society, but it's got to be realistic, you know. And right now, a lot of these requirements are not. They don't play out well in the real world. And then people just say screw it, and they're going to do what we've always done. So you know, it's really. You know, it's much more complex of an issue for me than do we regulate or not regulate. Of course, we need safety standards in place. We need some regulation in place. You know, I don't know if you guys saw the report out of UC Davis here in California, where they had, and think that they've honed down the reason that 3 of their cancer patients died from fungal infections due to the cannabis that they were buying and smoking here that was just not clean, you know. And so they're immune compromised, and they're smoking cannabis that has different funguses and molds, and they were all of a sudden getting these fungal infections in their lungs and dying. And they couldn't figure out why and where it was coming from. And they worked with Steep Hill Labs to test a lot of these, because they're not allowed to. Again, the ridiculousness of it. UC Davis, some of the best labs in the country, weren't allowed to do their own testing, so they had to work with Steep Hill. And they found the specific fungus on 90% of the samples that they tested. You know, I think, you know, some of those things, depending on the normal everyday user, probably wouldn't be affected by those things. But when we start to understand, when we label something as medicine, we have to understand that it could get into the most fragile hands possible, and there needs to be some understanding of what that means, and that means regulation. But
you know what, though, we don't label, you know, a loaf of bread medicine, but it's trackable back to where it was produced, because we as consumers are afforded those protections in almost anything we buy. And I mean, it's even greater if you're actually using it as a medicine to treat a child. But we should have the same kind of accountability for our bags of weed as we do the brownies we buy, you know, from Little Debbie at Safeway. So I don't think that, I think producers have to kind of get to that point of responsibility and realizing that they have to be held accountable for the products they're using and they're putting out, because that's agriculture. That's how this system works. And if you want to be insulated and not have to fear going to prison or having the man come and show up and steal your shit and put your kids away, you know, then you have to deal with regulation and accountability. Yeah. It's just the only practical thing to do.
They should be able to make organic marijuana and label it as thus, and they should be able to produce, you know, swag commercial marijuana where there might be some sort of little bits of traces of something on it, like commercial vegetables in the grocery store.
Yeah, a grading system makes perfect sense there. So.
As long as the customer knows what they're getting.
Right, organic food for a long time, but
kosher.
But there is inorganic food available at every supermarket. You can go in and spend less money and buy foods that actually have trace amounts of pesticides all over them, and because that is the opposite of organic, correct? Right. But my other problem with Azamax and Azatrol is that shit would be on your organic food. So you're double fucked, you know, because that is listed as an organic certified product. So fucking shit on us consumers a little more, you know?
I think cannabis really needs medical standards, which would be more strict than organic, where we're really talking, if it's going to be sold as medicine, it really needs to be to the strictest possible standards of cleanliness, purity, and quality. Like Forrest was saying, you can't take a chance that you're going to potentially harm some of the weakest.
So those are regulations that are necessary. And then we look into regulations that are more damaging than good, which is, you know, in California, we have almost an 80% tax on leaf, right? It's like somewhere around $44 a pound it works out to. That I've sat into, you know, that would make, you know, so say, for example, we had a farm who wanted, it was organic or clean green, whatever you want to call it, hopefully even higher standards in clean green. And then they want to donate their machine trim to a charitable organization. Like I want to try to create some charitable organizations that deal with those who need cannabis. You know, the state has their hand out for $44 a pound tax on that donation, those sort of things, with no sort of stipulation on whether it's to be sold or not sold or what the purpose of it is used for. I think those sort of things need to be addressed. I think that's a regulation that can potentially, one, do more harm than good because it's ridiculous. It's more of a higher tax rate than on the flower itself, but just the fact that it's
using percentages instead of not actual dollar numbers, because it sounds like the state is as guilty as using, you know, yesterday's prohibition era profits for their basis as the, you know, growers wanting to move forward with big dreams. It should be a percentage of the sale. It shouldn't be, well, like
Yeah, I agree.
9% sales tax. We don't pay $100 on whatever the fuck it is, a 99-cent lighter.
Yeah.
Or $44 on what would be a 99-cent lighter. And
Well, that's the
where
thing.
I feel like that's a little screwy. And why don't they implement percentages instead of dollar denominations?
Well, it was screwier than that before. A lot of the lobbying we've been doing a lot of lobbying at the state level, along with the California Growers Association and other organizations, to deal with the harvest tax. I mean, that one was even crazier here in California. I don't know if you guys saw that, where it was a dollar percentage per pound, or a dollar amount per pound. It was like $9 or something like that. Harvest tax,
$9 an ounce.
And now, okay, the second that it was cut. So on wet weight, right? You don't know if it's clean, hasn't been tested yet. You don't even know if it can go to market. And the second it's cut, you're supposed to weigh and have this tax at harvest. You know, so there was a lot just voted on in our ALMA Prop 64 that it just made no sense, and then we're having to go back and try and change as much of it as we can. With the harvest tax, you can change it to the point of harvest to the point of sale without a vote of the people, because you're not changing the tax amount. So it's something that can be passed with 2/3 vote of the House, not necessarily having to go back to the voters. But with some of these other taxes that were just, the numbers were ridiculous. I've sat with the assemblyman myself, and where they scratch their heads saying, we have no idea how this got through, or if it just was a mistake. They figured it probably was just a mistake. But now they can't change it because it was voted on by a vote of the people. It's too much of a change for it to be fixed in the House. It has to go back to another vote in order to fix some of these things. So it's complicated and it's a mess, but you know, hopefully we can get it done.
When I lived in Holland, I you know, when I was dating a girl that went to the University of Amsterdam, and we were talking about the sociology around legal prostitution. And one of the reasons that the Dutch government legalized it is because one of their arguments was, look, it's going to happen, like it or not. And I think that they have to look at regulating what is going to be an uncontrollable activity, meaning people are going to smoke weed or transfer weed or grow weed and sell weed, and they're going to furnish weed or whatever they got to do with weed. Even prohibition couldn't stop that from happening. So if these politicians get greedy, they're just going to foster an underground economy that has existed and flourished for decades and knows how to operate. So the only way that, you know, this whole community is going to come out and actually interact is if the interaction is fair to them.
Right.
Or they're going to resist it. I mean, people in the room saying, fuck all this, I won't pay that. And I feel it. You know, I come from New England. What do we learn in school when we're little kids? You know, no taxation without representation, you know, and the fucking, you know, we learn tax resistance and what it was implemented for, because it was like part of how we all got our shit together back in the day. But it's almost kind of happening again with cannabis, because here they're coming along and saying $44 on something that might cost $4.
Right, right.
And it's obnoxious. And when are we going to get to a point of cost of production around cannabis? Because when we do, I mean, I was reading somewhere it said lettuce is 15 cents a pound or whatever. I mean, why the fuck should cannabis be any different? They grow in about the same amount of time in the same conditions.
Yep.
Yes.
If lettuce was prohibited, it'd probably be a lot more expensive.
Right, but I think that the politicians shouldn't be, you know, salivating over 1990s prices and thinking they're going to get a piece of a $400 ounce of pot, when that, you know, the pound of pot shouldn't even cost $400. And in a sense related to lettuce, it should maybe cost less than $10 a pound. Yeah. And that might be really hard for cannabis growers to really accept, especially the older ones that are used to getting older prices. But they're going to have to realize that the readjustment is going to have to happen, because if they don't readjust the cost of production, their neighbors will, and they'll just be out of business, or they'll be growing their own.
Yeah, and that's the problem. And if they don't make something that makes sense, everyone's going to go back into the underground market. And for a lot of areas, that's not a problem. But when you get into, again, you know, medicine and the need for certain types of regulation, people forced back into the black market, or forced to some of the companies I talked about earlier in the show that I think are, you force them into their arms, which they're kind of wolves in sheep's clothing that look like they're your saviors, but I really have strong opinions that they're not good for the community. This is a problem. So that's where advocacy at the state level and us working at the state level to help find regulations that make sense from the point of the most fragile in our community, I think can help benefit everybody, because if we can take care of that, we can develop a system that I think everyone can function in my opinion.
I think low-cost cannabis available to the masses could be the best thing that could happen to society, because we are in a minority experiencing very positive effects from being, brave enough to use cannabis or lucky enough to be exposed to cannabis. And think of how many more people would benefit if they didn't have to go through the stigma or the bravery or the courage. They could just go and pick up a can of canned cannabis, bring it home, and pop it open and smell some fresh buds and see how it goes for the first time. And I look forward to that day, and I definitely believe everybody deserves to feel the benefits and feel the euphoric feelings of cannabis, as they put it, that I have felt throughout my life.
Hear, hear.
Yes.
Agreed on my side as well. I'm just actually really loving the effects of cannabis this afternoon, this morning. Just 8 days off and going hard. Hash Church episode 131. As always, we got about 750 people watching live right now. Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a good day. Hope you're enjoying the conversation as we discuss all things cannabis. And getting into some deep conversations. I also wonder, though, if there's, and I'm not asking you to, tell us what company it was, but there has got to be a point where these companies get put on blast and people get to know what their name is, because it's how else are people to know that such practices are afoot if other than to make their own mistake, which is also a slippery slope, because of course companies are going to use that as a means to, socially poison companies that may or may not be involved in that. It just seems like, what do you do?
Yeah, well, I call them out online personally, but then, they tend to block you and that make sure that they can limit information into their people. And that's kind of how they work. I figure if someone has to go back and erase everything they put out online, they know that they were in the wrong, yet they continue to do it. And, in our media pages on our website, we're happy to put some of those folks on blast. And I think it needs to happen. To our parents, when I work with parents and the education of parents who are trying to figure out what's right for their kids, I'm very blunt. I'm saying, look at the behavior. Here's what you see. Here's why it's done. Here's why it's more profitable if they sell it to you this way. And this is why education is just key. I see education is key in every single topic that we're going to talk about with cannabis, whether it's best practices in cultivation, whether it's how to influence your community to get responsible regulation passed, or it's how to protect parents from being taken advantage of by companies that might not have their best interests at heart. It's all about education. So enable, for us to be able to then give free consultations to parents. I do about 3 a day, 7 days a week, to be able to answer questions, teach them about the science, teach them about the best way to approach dealing with them, and teach them how to look at products and know what they're looking at. Just the simple things. These are parents who are so vulnerable that they don't understand that concentration is different from ratio, right? So they pay a whole bunch more money for a 25-to-1, but they don't realize that the concentration is so low, their kids would probably have to drink 6 or 7 bottles to get a dose that is safe, that is therapeutically beneficial. So just some of those basic education can empower people to just make the right decision. And then with the companies that we work with, I try to educate them and talk about it from a parent's perspective of if you're there to help people, here's what information needs to be on the label. Here's the information we're training people to look for when they're going out to look for products. So we just have a long way to go to help bring up the standard of what we're doing and you know, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. It's just, I think we need people fighting the good fight along the way. And luckily, for every person that I see being what I would consider disingenuous, dishonest, or just manipulative, there's 10 who are not. You know, there are a lot of people out there who just want cannabis to reach its full potential for social good. There are a lot of people out there who care about helping people in their community. So I really think it's a minority, but unfortunately the stakes are so high, we have no choice but to call them out when we have to, or really make sure people are at least aware that it's going on.
Well, just make sure your lawyer okays that before you go on air with it so that you don't hurt yourself.
Sure. Well, yeah.
This has definitely been an uphill battle the whole time I've seen it. I've always thought education was the key to our freedom. You know, it's really what it's all about is us being responsible for educating our neighbors and kind of turning them on to the information that we are already exposed to.
Well, it's nothing new to the community. You know, there's always been people in the community well before the sort of legal aspect of things for medicinal came into play. There were people who were trying to sell their herb for absolutely as much as they could. You know, if they could get $10,000 for a pound, they would have sold it for $10,000 a pound. And so it's kind of like the same sort of, you know, everyone likes to make a lot of money, but then it gets sort of twisted to the point where it's on that scale, and now you're actually producing that kind of profit and from suffering from people who are really in need. It's a fine line, you know, because like Sam says, there's a lot of work that goes into breeding and the people who are studying and doing the research and the developing of new strains through facilities and breeding and years of work. And at the same time, there's just what seems to be like the ethically or morally correct thing to do.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think there's a difference. If you have a strain that you have put all this time into, great. It's yours. You put that hard work into. But when you go to sell it to someone, don't leave off what's in the product when you're done. You know, CBD or THC or CBG or CBC isn't a trademarked product. So you get products that are sold as the savior for kids, and you go and look at it, and there's no information on the label. There's not the milligrams cannabinoids per ml. I mean, I know one very popular brand where all the label says is hemp extract. And even if you go to their website, it just says, what does it say? It says 53 grams hemp extract per 0.6 ml. You know, what the hell does that mean? You know, who's going to be able to go? So the problem is they that's not an accident. That is so that people don't know what they're getting, so that they have to continue to come back and use those things. Say, for example, if they can't afford it or they don't want them to go, realize that they can probably find other products that have the same dosages, have the same things. You know, that's not an accident. So, you know, that sort of practice to me might seem innocent on the surface, but you know, as I've said, and I won't repeat it anymore, I find it to be very distasteful. And, you know, that there's a difference there. You can have your proprietary strain and say, we have bred it to be high in these things, and we found this excellent balance, but you should at least know how to dose your child or yourself. And by know how to dose, that's milligrams per milliliter or per drop or per 0.5 ml or however they want to lay it out, so that you can dose per pound of body weight and things like that, and you can dial in what's needed for your system. Not keep everything smoke and mirrors so that all I know is I have to buy this product and take this much because I don't know really how much I'm ever getting. You know, that's kind of the difference I'm trying to point out. And you know,
withholding information is pretty common, unfortunately. You know, look at Coca-Cola and other things that won't release their recipes. But at the same time, from the perspective of withholding the amounts of terpenes and cannabinoids, just seems so shitty, especially, you know, but it also, you know, not that we all have the ability to do it, but parents can go to testing facilities themselves and actually get stuff tested once they procure it, and make sure that, because you know, I've seen the articles, one in Colorado where the news cameras went around and actually didn't get the same results that they had on the actual labels.
Right,
so
yeah.
There's a lot of disingenuous reporting happening even in the testing industry, when people are putting labels that may not actually reflect what's the contents.
Yeah, and we do the same thing there. I test all of them just because I'm curious, but I think when it comes to regulation, I think that should be a requirement. You shouldn't be able to sell an oil or a suspension without having the concentration on it, because, if I'm paying $300 for something that has a total of 50 milligrams in the whole bottle, that's something you don't even know if you're getting your money's worth for what you're buying. You have to be able to make educated decisions as a consumer. And, you can't do that, one, unless you know what to look for. And two, the companies have some sort of requirement to at least put what's in it somewhere on that label. And I know that that's not the case now, but, it might not be popular in all circles, but I think that's something that's really important to happen. That it's definitely something we're going to campaign for. It's just not to give away all your secrets, but to just have some basic information as to what is in the product, so that people can make educated decisions. Because if you don't, people can get hurt.
In a situation like BPG, where they take their extracts and their buds and they test them independently of the grower because the city requires them to, they are putting truthful information on every label because they're not attached to that information. It just comes back. It is what it is. They print the label, they give it an item number, and they put it on the shelf once they know it's clean. That's kind of what I think we're going to see more of, especially if we get into a situation where more of the middlemen, like in a sense BPG becomes, working with the city of Berkeley and adhering to their regulations. It will be for the consumer, because now they will have protections of an independent test that comes in and isn't the grower that's like sitting there hoping that they pass the test. It's just some middle person that says, hey, your stuff is good, or you got to come pick it up. Either way, they don't care. It's just another day in their course of business.
Perfect.
Well, we look forward to that too, because being the ones that are setting the standards has been very costly and expensive, and other people have been allowed to go and take their cannabis elsewhere. And I'm not sure if and I need to read into these regulations further to find out if the state is going to destroy it if it actually fails tests in the future or not. So your potential to lose your investment due to bad growing could be exponential. And that's a reality that farmers face, and along with other farmers, because as I know, there's no songs about farming. There's only laments, because farming's hard, and getting a product to market successfully every time is very difficult and challenging.
Well, how would people feel if, when they took the test, the gamble was that stuff got destroyed if it came back contaminated, or it's good, they can sell it, everything's great? I mean, because that would really put, it puts it on the line, because being able to take contaminated material to, someone down the street that doesn't have the money or the ability to go get it tested or the integrity, and will just put it on the shelf, is a real problem to the consumers that are around these places.
And we as dispensaries had that initial, question early on. Do we buy the machine and have and test it ourselves in-house, or do we third-party independently test it? And that's why we always went with third-party independent testing, because we never wanted to be accused of the fox watching the hen house, which is easy to do. And so by having an independent lab and scientists and let science decide it, we wash our hands of it. It is literally, as you stated, it's just matter-of-fact business. It's science is science. It is replicatable. So if that's why we also send extra cannabis with tests. So if something does fail, we have a backup of that representation. So that is put through that test. And if that test secondary fails, that's it. We've got a secondary backup that proves that the science is valid and that your product does not pass muster. And currently it's just returned to them. However, with the state and with the distributor setup, we're not sure how the distributors are going to handle it. I just quoted you the numbers of what they're just cost wise, but we still don't know all the different the depths of this onion yet.
It's going to be pretty costly to make mistakes in the future is the reality. If you actually go ahead and think you're going to slide under the radar, you're not. And I think that that will be a good thing, because in the same regard, I don't want to buy, little Debbie brownies, not that I ever do, but I don't want to buy the things laden with pesticides just because it was easier to kick them out the door. So as a consumer, I want those protections, just like I get the protections, at any grocery store.
And right now we can test for 59 different pesticides, and that's what we're doing. And that is a slow science. After 10 years, we're continuing to build to get to 60 so that we can get hopefully every representation out there. But, Sam can attest, science is not fast, and it is a slow applied reality that we're getting there. But on top of that, realize these costs initially are going to be high until they get it more stabilized. And in time, these prices are going to come down for testing. This is just the initial until they get their act together and figure out what's actually taking place.
Well, and not to go down another rabbit hole, but one thing we've had come up where we've had to steer away from products is heavy metals levels in some concentrates and oils, because of people who are juicing or breaking down the stalks and the root systems where in soil where cannabis, and that's one of the great things about cannabis is it's a bioaccumulator. It'll pull these things out of the soil. But if there are people who are taking whole plants and breaking down all those parts, we've seen tests come back, and once we had access to heavy metals testing, is something that were dangerously high and could be a risk for smaller bodies, kids under 3 or so, in cases like that. So it's going to be a growing pain. There's going to be a lot of growing pains over the next 10 years as we work this out. But I think it's going to lead us to a better place. We're going to be able to solve these problems as they come up. We're going to be able to see them and just make better and better products and for everybody's health. So although it might be a challenge, or it might even push some people out of the ability to produce clean cannabis, I think it's going to be better in the long run.
What kind of metals and what kind of levels of metals did you see in samples that failed?
I'll have to pull up the test. It was so new. CPIL just started doing them. We had to send them to their lab in Oregon. I'd be happy to send them to you afterwards. I have to pull up the test to see if it's specified. But I'll send it to you afterwards. I don't remember off the top of my head. It's about 6 months ago, because you can't even get most of those tests done here in California right now. But the labs are just now looking at starting to add them, and I think once the requirements come in. So,
yeah, I mean, when you're talking about trace heavy metals in the environment, there's 4 that are particularly problematic, right? So those are the lead,
right,
chromium, cadmium, and let's see, am I missing one? Lead, chromium, cadmium, and arsenic. Arsenic's actually not a metal, it's actually a non-metal. But arsenate, which is highly mobile in the environment, is mostly a byproduct of pressure treated lumber. And so chromated copper arsenate is what's used to treat wood for telephone poles and railroad ties, and that stuff, as it comes out of service and gets landfilled, is extremely mobile in the environment. So whenever you're talking about heavy metals and heavy metal exposure and heavy metal contamination, it's really important to understand what metals are they talking about and what levels of those metals, because there's a lot of stuff that's sort of like background in the environment, but also the levels of detection are getting much more sensitive, in that they now have handheld XRF units that can measure things down to the parts per million, low parts per million regime. And so this is like when they started finding lead in toys coming from China. Well, the lead's always been in there. They just now have the handheld thing that they can detect it with now.
Right.
So, and I would also assume that, again, if you're looking at concentrates, most of the soluble. I mean, most trace heavy metals shouldn't be in concentration. It's not like a pesticide issue where if there's like a trace amount of material in the plant, it'll all be concentrated.
Right.
In most solvent-based methods, I wouldn't think you're actually going to concentrate heavy metals. If you're actually knocking off trichomes and physically removing trichomes, I mean, certainly anything that can contaminate the plant can contaminate your extracts. But specifically to solvent-based methods, I wouldn't expect those methods to be particularly prone to sort of selective extraction of metals that, as you mentioned,
no, I don't
cannabis
think,
and hemp in general is a what's called a phytoremediator, in that a lot of the bulk of the plant mass itself can, absorb systemically, non-equilibrium concentrations of metal ions as they occur in the environment.
Right. Yeah. No, I think where we see it the most are not in solvent extractions that are then suspended in a carrier oil, but more in some of the old school methods of long soaks, alcohol glycerin soaks that are then reduced, and some of those sort of kind of not as precise and clean methods,
I'd think that any heavy metal contamination could potentially come from the refinery processes that are used to refine gases, and also some of the anti-corrosion coatings and some of the slip agents that are sometimes used in these nozzles to make sure that they don't arc and they don't spark. And so the reason why a lot of these things, I mean, they're not really very, very dangerous materials, but I would not want them in your concentrates. I mean, a lot of them are approved for food and approved for food contact, but ingested at a large period of time and vaporized into the lungs, I would think that these things could certainly cause chronic, if not acute, health issues.
Yeah, I think it's where we get into what we know and what we suspect. I mean, there's still a lot of science to be done, but I mean, just you look at spectrum disorders and other issues, that there's a lot of science that points to it could have to do with the body's ability to process metals and heavy metals, the body's ability to clean those out and process them. So it's just one of those things where it's not something that we want to just be thinking is harmless. It's better if we had the choice. We definitely want to make sure that we're able to limit those levels as much as possible, especially when, we have patients now who are as young as 6 months old, right? So we're talking about small bodies. So it's just another one of those topics I think is good to, which why I did bring up once in a while for folks to be aware of.
Especially with the challenging effects that, there are so many chemical insults out there in the environment today that are out there today that maybe just weren't out there just a handful of years ago, and the exposure that some of these things are now showing in terms of buildup of formaldehyde from just burning candles. I mean, my wife has burned candles for years. I've always smelt that candle wax kind of paraffinic type smell. Well, they're claiming that some of those compounds right now that you smell, that paraffinic kind of smell, are actually polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and of the most cancer causing compounds that we know. And so you would think, well, it's just a candle. It could be a birthday candle, or it could be a Yankee candle. It's just something that's in everyone's households. But how dangerous
are soy candles better?
I'm sorry?
Are soy candles better? Obviously, they become rage.
You know what? My wife looked into this, and we've changed all our candles in the house now to soy-based candles because of this very, very issue. That's absolutely correct, Todd.
Make your own beeswax candles.
Yeah, right on, bro. Beeswax and soy are the two I only use. Yeah, I was wondering if I was just a crazy
hippie. There's a lot of other alternatives using paraffin-based candles. That's for sure.
Well, then I'm glad I switched.
A great way to test it is we have a really sensitive fire alarm system. And so like our little monitors are super sensitive. And if we burn those soy or those beeswax candles, they don't set it off. But if you burn one of those shitty candles where you get that smell, man, I'm telling you, the thing goes off so fast, like someone burnt something in the oven.
Wow.
It's quite something, yeah.
Well, they started finding elevated levels of formaldehyde in rooms, and especially draperies and carpets and stuff that's soft in the room that's going to absorb. And if you think about it, if you're just burning a candle and maybe you have, your pet or you have your children, walking around on the carpet in that room, they are being exposed to elevated levels of formaldehyde, which, over chronic exposure can cause health problems down the road. So I was just sort of adding that just as an added thing to, while you speak of like the endocannabinoid deficiencies and being able to treat those nutritionally by incorporating cannabis not only into your diet but vaporizing and using cannabis. A lot of it too, I would say about a third of it, is how our bodies metabolize and how our bodies affect it. And it brings it home to, like what Todd was saying, geez, I would put this on my plant. Would I put this in my body? It's like your body and the plant and how the chemistry interacts is really, really a function of your health and how well your body is already trying to maintain homeostasis by being able to rely on a good diet of healthy fats. Myself, I enjoy the carbohydrates, but certainly proteins and everything that your body needs to establish, a good, healthy lifestyle. And cannabinoids are part of it because they're fat-soluble antioxidants that go where other antioxidants in your diet just do not go. They get deposited into adipose tissue and stay in your body for a long time, which is an evolved trait in humans to hold on to these compounds as long as we could possibly keep them in our body because of their antioxidant, anti-inflammatory properties.
Well, thank you for the download there, Dr. Mark. That was very good.
Here's a beaker full of nothing.
Is it full of nothing or is it full of something?
Well, it's actually, it's full of air right now. We'll fill it up later, though.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear. Well, that was a solid 3 hours of Hash Church right there. I got to say, I'm feeling pretty good about that. That was very nice to hear from you again, Forrest, and Wade. To have you both on was, as always, a pleasure. Hope to have you guys back again.
Yeah, anytime. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I like the conversation. I like what you're doing. I like what both you guys are doing, but I do like the that you're preaching to a non-choir, which is an important group of people that kind of need to hear this. It's the normalization of using cannabis for children as a medicine. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And I think much like Todd has said, and I felt this way as well, I saw it with cannabis, starting with palliative and terminally ill patients and slowly but surely moving into a huge wide spectrum of people with a wide spectrum of different ailments or pains. And I think it'll happen the same for children, that, cannabinoids are essential nutrients to humans, and that children acquire them already in breast milk. And the ones that aren't lucky enough to acquire them in breast milk, I could see a day where they're, not purchasing their synthetic breast milk from companies like Nestle and Pablum, but producing, potentially cannabinoid rich alternative milks for children.
Yes.
So thanks everyone for coming out. D420K, Etienne, Skunkman Sam, Indra, Dr. Mark Scaldone, and Todd McCormick, and Johnny B, who has left the room. Thank you guys all for chilling out and having a good conversation. And thanks to High Integrity Glass Art for letting me do Hash Church here, and much appreciated, everyone. And hey, thanks to Prince, the little dog that I was holding up there, the little French bulldog. Pretty cool little dog. So have a great day, everybody. Sunday on, and we'll talk to you all next week.
All right. Thank you.
Peace.
Thank you.